It's going up to YouTube now.
Okay. So we good then?
It's
Almost. Okay. All this technology, brother.
good.
All right. So shalom, brothers and sisters. So we're continuing with our Apocalyptic Blitz series, right? And last Friday we finished Daniel chapter 8, and I was flipping the coin on whether to go into Daniel or whether to go into 2nd Ezra chapter 11 and 12 or Revelations chapter 13. And the reason why I'm gonna stick with Revelations chapter 13 is only because of the Greek element. And the reason why I say the Greek element, meaning in Revelations chapter 13, we'll read it, verses 1 and 2. It's still carrying, or I should say, it's still presenting the element of the foundation of the European Empire, which is in that leopard in verse 2, which we'll go to. And 2nd Ezra is really taking it from the rise of the Roman Empire on into the last days. So to me, it appears to be a more smoother, historically speaking, a smoother transition from Daniel chapter 7 and 8. Daniel chapter 2, Daniel chapter 7, Daniel chapter 8, we've gotten that. So now let's go to, y'all excuse me, let's go to Revelations chapter 13. And we'll start off at the top.
Revelation chapter 13, right?
Yeah.
All right, done.
Run 3. I'm a yet I got the reading.
He got it.
Okay, go ahead, Amiyat.
Revelation chapter 13 from the top, right? Verse 1?
Yeah, verse 1. We're going to break down the chapter.
Okay, Revelation chapter 13, verse 1. And I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And upon his horns, 10 crowns.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
And upon his heads, the name of blasphemy.
Right. So we're developing now from Daniel chapter 7 was where we got what? The 4th beast in verse 7. Daniel chapter 7 and verse 7. The 4th beast, which turned out to be the 4th empire the last in a succession of 4. One of the elements or one of the traits that it had was that it had 10 horns. Remember, Daniel chapter 7, verse 7, it doesn't give you like the previous beast. It doesn't tell you what specific animal it was. It just says that it was ferocious, it had great iron teeth, and that it stamped with the residue with its feet, the previous kingdom, the previous beast. But we know that it was symbolic for the Roman Empire. So, and it said it was different from the other beasts. I'm just citing to make the connection. We found out that the 4th beast in Daniel chapter 7 and verse 7 was different in that it opened up its opening days, right? Its nativity was founded as a republic, the Roman Republic, whereas the empires before, the Greeks, the Persians moving backward, right? The Babylonians, these were all monarchies, right? They were ruled by a king, and a king that conquered other kings and became an emperor. So that's what we found out. And so that last element, that last verse 7, the last precept, the last little a piece of information of Daniel 7 and 7, it said, and it also had 10 horns. So back now, Daniel is talking about the 10 horns in the perspective of the Roman, the 4th beast from the what? From territory. It had 10 regions, right? 10 provinces. And so we covered that. But now here we're in and I'm approving what I'm getting ready to say. We're looking at a vision. We're examining a vision that John the Revelator got of a what? Of the Roman Empire beyond the Republic. Remember, it said it was different. Y'all can remember. In Daniel chapter 7, it said that the fourth beast was different. And we found out through 1 Maccabees chapter 8, verses 1 through 16, that the way it was different was its form of government, because it exercised the same imperial practices as conquering nations, taking down their kings, bringing their populations into slavery, and bringing the people that they left in charge under tribute. They did that like any other nation. But in Daniel chapter 7, the difference in the fourth beast from the other three was that it was not a monarchy, and that it had a senate. That's what we went and found out. Well, here in Revelation chapter 13, we're getting a more what? A more evolved. We're getting a more evolved perspective of the Roman Empire. Daniel is giving it to us from the days of the Roman Republic up until the end, and this one is giving us to us from the Greeks and then the Romans up until the end. So when it says 10 horns, just so that you guys know, let's do this. The 7 heads first. The 7 heads are the dominant empires of the Edomite nation. The Edomites are one nation of people, just like the Israelites are. But the Israelites, we consist of 12 tribes, 12 families. So the nation of Edom have a similar structure with what? Well, they have different, now when I say different families, meaning different families in the modern terms. For instance, the Greek Edomites. So the 7 heads were the what? Out of that empire, or out of that nation, the 7. Now remember, we're going to get something else that's a little bit more evolved than this. That's why I'm saving second Esdras for after this. But concerning chapter 13, and from the perspective that the Most High, the historical point that the Most High is giving John, John is looking into the future and seeing from the 7 top empires, right, of the Edomite nation. And so the first one was the Greeks. And listen, I'm a Yetazah. First, let's read chapter verse 2. Let's read verse 2.
Revelations chapter 13 and verse 2. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard.
Stop right there. So the beast that he saw was like unto a leopard, but the leopard was the first horn of this nation. The leopard was the first of 7. The leopard is the 3rd beast in Daniel chapter 7. Daniel chapter 7 and verse 6, right? It talks about the leopard that had 4 heads and that had 4 wings of a fowl on the back of it. That was symbolic for what? The leopard itself was symbolic for the Greek Empire founded by Alexander the Great, right? Alexander III of Macedon, son of Philip II. And the 4 heads represented the Greek world after the Battle of Ipsus, after 301, where a 5th general was eliminated by 3 of them. So that there were four of those successors, 5 of those successors of Alexander, and 1 of them had been eliminated by the other 3. So that's what Daniel saw. Like I said, they're seeing these visions, but their visions are indicative to these empires in various stages of their development. So here, the leopard, the beast, meaning the nation, is a leopard. And now we're going to put some scriptures with this so that you can see how the Most High consider all of the other so-called white folks the sons of the Greeks. We're going to read that before we finish this, by the time we get out of verse 2. So this leopard, this leopard is the Greek world. Continue on the Yetazah.
Okay, verse 2. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear.
Now stop. So his feet were as the feet of a bear. Now remember, from Daniel chapter 2, what is the feet of an image represent? It represents the end. You there, Amiyatazar?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I didn't know. I thought your thing disappeared. The feet of, like for instance, Daniel chapter 2. Remember, we saw the very same succession of Daniel chapter 7, but it was given in the form of a single image, a single statue. And the head was gold. It was representative of the or symbolic of the Babylonian Empire. The breast and the arms of silver was symbolic of the Persian and Mede Empire that followed it. Then there was the Persians and Medes were succeeded by who? By the Greeks, which was symbolized in this image by the belly and the thighs of brass. In other words, we're moving farther down to this beast. We're moving farther down the image, and it wasn't the legs represented the Roman Empire, and then the feet, part iron and part miry clay, represented what? Represented the fourth beast in its final days. So here in Revelation chapter 13 and verse 2, the leopard is the nation. But because they're the ones who are, and Esau will tell you this in all of his little humanities courses and university courses about history, and they'll say civilization began with the Greeks, and it leaves people wondering because people think they're talking about civilization in general, but they're not. They're speaking in reference to their own civilization, Western civilization. They all attribute their nativity to what? To Greece. So the leopard is the Greece, the leopard is the Greek empire, the first of 7 horns or 7 heads, the first of 7 heads. But the feet, like unto the bear, represents this very same nation, but the kingdom at its last end. And so today we know very much, everybody knows that out of the Edomite civilization, the nation that's one of the 7 heads that carries the national emblem of the bear is the Russians. And so John is seeing now this beast and elements that symbolize some of its dominant traits or some of its dominant kingdoms. So you got the Greek Empire, and from them, in their final days, the Russians are there. That's the bear, the feet of the bear. And they said, go ahead, Amiyatazar, after that.
And his mouth as the mouth of a lion.
And the mouth of the lion. Now the feet represent the end. And this goes with Ezekiel chapter 38 and 39. Because why? Because the Most High, or I should say, how do we justify that? Because the Most High lets us know that Gog, Magog, meaning what? The land mass and the king of that place is going to be used to usher in the end. They're going to be used to throw that fatal blow to their civilization. That's what the Russians represent. And that's why the Most High have the feet of a bear. This is why it doesn't say the head was a bear or the mouth was a bear. But in other words, it's all symbolic of the role that they're to play in the development and the end of this nation. So the lion, it said the mouth was like a lion, but and this is another of the 7 heads. The Russians and the Americans and the British in 2nd Ezra chapter 11 and 12 represent the 3 heads of the eagle. The Most High gives us the same image, but he gives us a different structure, but all the same elements and then a few more. So here, the mouth of the lion represents the British. And remember, the British were under the eagle. People don't understand the British, well, they only got as far as Hadrian's. Do me a favor, Amiyatazar. Look up Britannia, Roman province, Britannia, and then look up Hadrian's Wall. That's as far as they got, man. It took a long time for them to move farther north beyond the Picts, the Picts. They made movies about that. They made a movie called Centurion about the Picts. They made a movie called The Eagle. The dude that played in one of the White House Down movies, with the one with Jamie Foxx was the president. He was in that movie trying to bring honor back to his father's house, because his father belonged to the legion that got destroyed by the Picts up beyond Hadrian's Wall? You find anything on that, like a map or anything? The point is, up until go ahead. Hadrian's Wall, right? Volume Aelium, also known as the Roman Wall, the Picts. See that? The Picts Wall, P-I-T-C-S, because they was whooping the Romans' ass, brother. Or Valum Hadriani in Latin, is a former defensive fortification of the Roman province of Britannia, begun in AD 122 in the reign of the Emperor Hadrian. Now, the reason why, and then they got a little map right there to the left where you can see everything above them walls. Antonine Wall, that came afterward. Let me see, 142, one what? I can't see the year of Antonian Wall. But
142, yeah.
Huh?
Begun in AD 142.
AD 142. And the other one was in 122, right?
Yeah.
So you see how it took 20 years to cover a little bit more land. That was a hard island to take out. So the point is that up until the 11th or the 12th century, Britain still carried the eagle. But it was during the time of the 12th century, the last decade of the 12th century, 1190, the 1190s, where King Richard the Lionheart. This was the cat that put or introduced as the new emblem of that region, remember, it was no longer a province of the Roman Empire. This is this is medieval times, and Rome has been overthrown, right? And this is during the Dark Ages and during the Crusades. This is how you know little Richard the Lionheart was one of the families of Israel, because he was probably one of the last kings of England to I think he participated like in the Third Crusade, bankrupt Britain, the whole nine. Point is, that lion represents the British, and the British were under the eagle. The eagle was their Roman signal, like all the other provinces. But during the reign of this king, this Israelite king, he introduced the lion as that emblem, and then all kings after him followed. And as a part of the Renaissance, the Edomites that assumed these family names kept that. You know what I'm saying? Just to continue on the identity theft that they perpetrated, right? Assuming the identity of the ousted Israelites in England. So the lion's mouth represents the British. And why the mouth? Well, if you understand what people today call conspiracy theory, right? Conspiracy, most people know that the Brits, the ruling class elites, the orders that go out into the world for all nations to follow, for all heads of state to follow, they come out of England. They come out the so-called royal line of England. And this is why every time you see the Queen of England go anywhere, the head of state, what do they got to do? And Yet, you notice they all got to bow before. You notice that, right? Do me a favor, Yet, pull up the picture of Barack Hussein Allahu Akbar Obama bowing before
Queen England?
Before Queen Elizabeth, yeah. She's like about 300 years old by now, right? Old ass lady. Old ass man, for all I know. You know, after they get Esau get a certain age, you can't tell what they are. So that's what while he finds that this is what the verse 2 represents, man. It's talking about the Greco-Roman Empire, and the Most High is giving John a view that symbolizes the Roman. You have the Roman element. Where is the Roman element found? The Roman element is found in verse 1 with the 10 horns. That's what lets us know it's directly related to Daniel chapter 7 and verse 7. But the Greek element, which actually preceded the Romans, is found here in verse 2. And in Daniel chapter 7 is verse 6, the leopard. And then everything after that are the what? The different horns or the different heads that would evolve after them. You found anything, Amayetazar? While you're looking, I'm gonna be reading.
Okay.
So let's do this before we move on into this verse 2. Let's go quantify the leopard, right? The Greek Empire as being the father of all of them. So where do we get that at? We get that at Joel chapter 3. And the Most High is admonishing the nations that partook, that participated in the transatlantic slave trade, believe it or not. I'm gonna show y'all. So let's let me put a marker here. And we go to Joel, the book of Joel, Old Testament, chapter 3. I think I'm gonna have you start at verse 5. Let me get there. Or I'll start at verse 5. I mean, because I'm still looking.
Okay, then. Joel.
Chapter 3. And yes, you know what we're going to do? You're going to actually start at verse 4. We're going to read verses 4 to 6. Now, why are we reading this? We're reading this to accommodate, right? Or to at least do a little bit more explaining in Revelations chapter 13 and verse 2. Why did it say the beast was like unto a leopard? Because the beast represents the nation. The beast represents that civilization. So then all the other elements, like the bear, the feet of the bear and the mouth of the lion, are elements of that beast, which is the leopard. In other words, the leopard represents the Edomite civilization and in its nativity, its introduction as a world power, right? World power as in the known world. Read on, Amayetazah. Verse, you're in Joel chapter 3 and verse 4.
Yea, and what have ye to do with me, O Tyre and Zidon, and all the coasts of Palestine?
Now stop right there, because he's identifying. When you read Genesis chapter 10, the Table of Nations, you'll find out that Zidon was the oldest son of Canaan. So these are Hamites. And Tyre was one of their chief cities, coastal cities, which today is a principal city in Lebanon. So he says, what have you to do with me, O Tyre and Zidon? And who else?
Palestine, the coast of Palestine.
Palestine in the old days is what? We know it's called the land of the Philistines. Those are Egyptians. Those are one of the many sons of Mizraim. Once again, for that information, Genesis chapter 10, Table of Nations. You go and you look for the sons of Ham, and then you get to Mizraim and you read all of those sons, and it'll say one of them of whom Philistim, of whom came the Philistines. And today they call that land Palestine, right? And today it is occupied by Arabs, people of Arab descent, right? Now I say Arabs, not necessarily the descendants of Ishmael, but back then they were the seed of who? They were the seed of Ham, both of them. The Philistines come from the son of Ham, whose name was Mizraim. And Tyre and Zidon come from the sons of Ham, another son of Ham, whose name was Canaan. So it's letting us know that these were Hamites that did what we're going to read in the rest of this verse. Go ahead, I'm going to get this up from the top again of that verse.
Okay. Joel chapter 3 and verse 4. Yea, and what have you to do with me, O Tyre and Zidon, and all the coasts of Palestine? Will you render me a recompense? And if you recompense me, swiftly and speedily will I return your recompense upon your own head.
In other words, the Most High said, is there any way that you can pay back to me what you've done to my people? And if you make any attempt, I'm not going to accept it. That's what he's telling you. I'm going to throw it back on your own head. Go ahead.
Verse 5. Because you have taken my silver and my gold, and have carried into your temples my goodly, pleasant things.
All of the wealth that we had on us while we were while our fathers, those of us who come from the kingdom of Judah, right? Judah, Benjamin, and Levi, these are the brothers that was in the continent of Africa for those 1400 years after the fall of Jerusalem in 70 AD, and at constant war with the indigenous people of the continent of Africa and the invading Arabs, these were the people that had taken us down and selling us off. They acquired our wealth while made added wealth by trading us to the Europeans, which he's going to mention right here. Go ahead, Amiyatazar.
Verse 6. The children also of Judah and the children of Jerusalem have you sold unto the Grecians.
Stop right there. So he's letting you know that the children of Judah, which means, and of Jerusalem, they were inhabited at the time of the fall of Jerusalem by 3 tribes, and a bunch of the different tribes that came down, members, families of the other tribes that came down during the time of Solomon's son, when they fled from Jeroboam. The scriptures tell you that in 2 Kings chapter 17, and also it tells you that in Chronicles, the equivalent of that account in the book of Chronicles, that many of the children of the other tribes of the north, along with the Levites that were kicked out, came and dwelt down in the kingdom of Judah because they didn't want to deal with that idolatry that Jeroboam was taking them through. Tobit, well, that's a different account. Tobit was one of those that used to constantly come down and still do his sacrifices in Jerusalem, rather than to participate in the idolatry that was taking place in his own land. The point is, all of those tribes, those 3 tribes and a couple of other scraggler families from other nations, I say scraggler meaning not pertaining necessarily to the kingdom of Judah, right? They were sold, it says, to what? Thou have sold the children of Judah, also of Judah, and the children of Jerusalem have ye sold unto the Grecians. Now, the transatlantic slave trade, were we being sold to the Greeks? No, we weren't. We were being sold to the British. Let's start from the beginning. We were being sold to the Portuguese, to the Spanish, right? The reason for which we speak Portuguese in Brazil and Spanish in the rest of Latin America. We were being sold to the what? To the French. The reason we speak French in what? In Haiti and other portions of the New World. We were being sold to the English and the Dutch. So why did the Lord, now that's on this end. Greece wasn't even a power back then, right? So why did the Lord say, you sold my sons, the children of Judah and of Jerusalem, to the Greeks? Because the British, the French, the Spanish, the Portuguese, the Dutch, all of them are what? Families that began with the birth of the Greek nation. And that's why the Lord said in Revelation chapter 13 that beast was a leopard. Why? Because that was them. They took down the Persians and the Medes, and that was what? Western Europe's birth on a quote, let's say becoming a regional power. All right. I wanted to show you that. I mean, you have to read verse 6 in its entirety.
Verse 6. The children also of Judah and the children of Jerusalem have you sold unto the Grecians, that ye might remove them far from their border.
And that's what happened. So when they sold us to the Greeks, we were removed far from our border, but from where? We wasn't moved. We didn't, for the most part, we got sent to the New World. Of course, you also had the Arab slave trade. It wasn't called the Arab slave trade. It was called the Red Sea slave trade, and it was called the Sahara slave trade, and it was called the Indian Ocean slave trade, where we were being traded. We were being brought from various places in the continent of Africa and shipped over and spread throughout the Eastern Hemisphere. But all of those places, the Most High says the sons of to the children or to the Grecians, but it wasn't the quote Greeks as we know them today. It wasn't even the Greeks that we knew from yesterday, the Arabs. It was what the Alexander's descendants. It was talking about those children, those nations that grew out of the what? The Greco-Roman Empire. And that's why the beast in Revelation chapter 13, verse 1 and 2, is being introduced as what we know it today, the Greco-Roman Empire. Whereas in Daniel chapter 7, verses 6 and 7, they're introduced as what? As 2 independent kingdoms, 2 independent beasts. The third beast was a leopard, and the fourth beast that didn't have an image, but we find out later that it was the eagle. But then today we refer to both of them as what? Or we refer to it as the Greco-Roman Empire because of the Greek culture that couldn't be erased, but the Roman military and the Roman military and and political and monetary structure. But the culture and the education and the quote enlightenment and the top language, the educated language, was that of, that's why the man was so shocked when Paul spoke Greek. And remember, when Christ was crucified, Pontius Pilate had what? Had the sign put up in Hebrew, Greek, and Latin, because Israelites were speaking Latin also. Now, I want to get one more concerning the Greeks. Go to Zephaniah. It's the Zephaniah that return you to the stronghold. When I have bent the bow, filled it with Judah. I mean, filled the bow. When I built the bow with Judah and filled it with Ephraim. It tells you that in, let me see, that might be chapter 9, Zechariah. Go to the book of Zechariah. Zechariah chapter 13, I believe. Zechariah is like the second or third to the last. There's a verse, Yetazah, it says, turn you, let me see. No, that's not 13, let me see. It says, turn you to the stronghold, ye prisoners of hope. That's how it introduces. It's chapter 9 and verse 12.
Yeah.
Chapter 9 and verse 12. You're going to read verse 12 and 13. Now, this is a prophecy, the Most High announcing our vengeance. He's announcing him giving vengeance to both of the kingdoms. But against who? Listen to what he says. Yet as I read that. Zechariah chapter 9 and verse 12 and 13.
Zechariah chapter 9 and verse 12. Turn you to the stronghold, ye prisoners of hope. Even today do I declare that I will render double unto thee.
The Most High said he's going to give us double for everything that we've lost. Go ahead.
When I have bent Judah for me, filled the bowl with Ephraim.
Now stop. Listen. So Judah is the kingdom that we just read about in Joel. But listen to what he's announcing, because people like to read this and say, this was fulfilled during the days of Maccabees. But that's not true, because Ephraim wasn't around when the Greeks conquered us, right? All of the tribes of the North Kingdom had already been made it over to the Americas and the other places where we scattered to, leaving Assyria. So read that verse again, Yetazah. Verse 13.
Verse 13. When I have bent Judah for me, filled the bowl with Ephraim, and raised up thy sons, O Zion.
Listen to this. And raised up thy sons, O Zion. In other words, he's describing Judah as a bow, whereas Ephraim, the tribe that come from the kingdom of Ephraim or the kingdom of Israel, whose king came out of the tribe of Ephraim, as the object that's going to be ignited or propelled by Judah. When I have filled up Judah, when I have bent me the bow, filled it with Ephraim, and raised up thy sons, O Zion. Go ahead.
Against thy sons, O Greece, and made thee as the sword of a mighty man.
So the Most High even is telling you what? Who he's going to use Israel to take vengeance on who? He says Greece. But why does he say Greece? When Greece wasn't the last one that the Greeks are the fathers of the Edomite nation as concerning civilizations. They are Edomites first and foremost, but their first great empire introduced into a grand region, right? From Greece all the way to India are the Greeks. And then all of the families that exist today come from them. So you see that. I'm going to read that one more. I want you to read that one more time. Verse 13.
Verse 13. When I have bent Judah for me, filled the bowl with Ephraim, and raised up thy sons, O Zion, against thy sons, O Greece, and made thee as the sword of a mighty man.
Now let me show you this. This is what's going to take place. Now, before we even now let's take all of that. Let's take Joel chapter 3, right? Verses 4 through 6. About you sold my sons, you sold the children of Judah and the children of Jerusalem to the sons of the Greeks or to the Grecians. Now here he's saying what that he's going to raise us up against Greece and make us as the sword of a mighty man. But when you read Ezekiel chapter 25, y'all can write this now. We can read it. Ezekiel chapter 25 and verse 12 through 14, it tells you that it's Israel going to be coming up against what? Against Edom. The Edom of Ezekiel chapter 25 is the Greece of Zephaniah or Zechariah chapter 9. The Edom of Ezekiel chapter 25 verses 12 through 14 is the Grecians of Joel, right? Of Joel chapter 3 and verse 6. Just like the beast of Daniel, the beast of Revelation is Esau of Isaiah chapter 35. All of these verses and chapters coincide, but in the Old Testament, the Most High is given biblical names, right? And then in the New Testament, the Most High is giving images that allude to the kingdoms whose biblical name is given in the Old Testament. So just to link the Greeks and the Edomites together, let's go to, like I said, Ezekiel chapter 25, verses 12 through 14.
What verse up? Ezekiel 25.
Ezekiel chapter 25 and verse 12
Through 14.
Thus saith the Lord power, because that Edom have dealt against the house of Judah by taking vengeance, and have greatly offended and revenged himself upon them. Therefore, thus saith the Lord power, I will also stretch out mine hand upon Edom, and will cut off man and beast from it.
Mm-hmm.
I will make it desolate from Teman,
Go ahead.
and they of the Dan shall fall by the sword.
Talking about all the different families of Esau. Go ahead.
Verse 14, and I will lay my vengeance upon Edom by the hand of my people Israel.
Hold on. The same people that the Most High is going to use to get the Grecians are the same people that he's going to use to do what? To get, and all the verses, let me say this. There's a couple of verses that I left out in each place, so we're going to actually backtrack. This right here is showing you who the Most High is going to use to execute his vengeance, and it's going to be us. So finish that again, Amayetazar.
Verse 14, and I will lay my vengeance upon Edom by the hand of my people Israel, and they shall do in Edom according to mine anger and according to my fury, and they shall know my vengeance, saith the Lord power.
Now let's backtrack. So let's go to Zechariah chapter 9, and you're going to read verse 13. But this time, I want you to read verse 14 also, because it's going to show you in the day that the Most High uses us, he's going to be there. This is not going to be, people think, the brothers even in Israel think the Most High is going to use Israel to tear up America. No, he ain't. That's why the scriptures tell us in Isaiah 26 to go, come my people, go enter into thy closet and enter into thy chambers and shut the doors behind thee, right? And hide thyself as it were for a moment. Hold on, it's my alarm. And hide thyself as it were for a moment. And then it says, until the indignation be past. Most High ain't gonna use us to tear America up any more than he used us to tear up Egypt. And he didn't use us to tear up Egypt. He tore up Egypt.
Yeah.
You understand? So, but what happened, this is talking about after we've been raised up, purged out, or I should say delivered first from all of the lands of our captivities, taken to the wilderness, got the hell and the rebellion beat out of us, the weakness and the femininity beat out of the men, the masculinity beat out of the women, right? The Most High is going to raise this army up, and then he's going to lead us around the world to take down the nation. I'm going to show you that. So we're back in chapter 13. All of this is just to show that when the Lord say the Greeks, he's actually talking about what? All of the families of the so-called white nation, of the Edomite nation. So go ahead, you're back in chapter 9 of Zechariah, and you're going to read verse 13 and 14 this time.
Okay, Zechariah chapter 9 and verse 13. When I have bent Judah for me, filled the bowl with Ephraim, and raised up thy sons, O Zion, against thy sons, O Greece, and made thee as the sword of a mighty man.
Go ahead.
And the Lord shall be seen over them.
So that
and
means we're going to be on the ground whooping up nations, being used as the sword of a mighty man. But the Lord, it says, is going to be seen over us. He's going to be in that chariot over us. Just like he was what? That the cloud that you read about in Exodus, that followed us from Exodus all the way to Deuteronomy. And then once we entered into the promised land under Joshua's guidance, then the chariot went on and did its thing. The Most High said, in this day, when he raises up, the Lord shall be seen over now, and he's going to be attacking. Watch this. Go ahead, Amiyatazah, from the top of 14 again.
Verse 14. And the Lord shall be seen over them, and his arrow shall go forth as the lightning.
Now, what does it mean when it says his arrow? Because it's talking about what? In terms of weapons and projectiles. But his arrow is going forth like lightning. It's talking about rays. Ew. That's what it said in Daniel chapter 7. It said, as I beheld in verse 9, right? Till the Ancient of Days did sit. And his wheels were like the burning flame, and his throne like the burning, like wheels of fire. And a fiery stream went forth from before him. Right? That's what it tells you. Joel chapter, what is it? Joel chapter 2? Or is it Isaiah chapter 13? It's so many verses that tell you that. It tells you when the Lord comes, he's going to be shooting fire from before him. And it says, when he gets here, it says the world is going to be like the Garden of Eden. It says, but when he leaves, it's going to be like a smoldering wasteland. Then when you read Habakkuk says he had horns coming out of his hands. But when you read it in Spanish, it tells you that it was rays. Y rayos salía de su mano. It tells you that rays came out of his hands. It says the same thing in Portuguese. Y raios saiu da mão. It's cold, man. So it's all throughout the scriptures. It's telling you that the Most High going to be shooting with rays. Christ going to be shooting with rays out of his hands. And the Most High is going to still be in the chariot shooting fire and we call it rays, but that's like the futuristic. You watching those movies and it don't just be rays, it be futuristic pulses of light that be fiery. It's gonna be cold, huh?
Laser.
Yeah, lasers, but I mean something beyond lasers, because the scriptures don't even describe it. The scriptures say he's gonna destroy them with the law, which is like unto fire. It's something similar to fire, but it ain't fire. It's cold. That's what it tells you. So in 2 Ezra chapter 13. So this is us on ground attacking. And just like in the old days during the time of Moses and Joshua, the Most High going to be firing from above. Go ahead, Amiyatazah, verse 14.
Verse 14 of Zechariah chapter 9. And the Lord shall be seen over them, and his arrow shall go forth as the lightning. And the Lord power shall blow the trumpet, and shall go with whirlwinds of the south.
So, but what are the whirlwinds? People thinking it's tornadoes. It's talking about all of those chariots that people spot that have that circular centrifugal motion. So he's been telling us this. But who is this going to be against? It's going to be against, according to Zechariah, the Greeks, or against Greece. According to Ezekiel chapter 25, against Edom. According to Zechariah chapter 9, against the Grecians. So it's showing you that's who the leopard represents. It represents what? The foundation, the beginnings, right? The beginnings of the Edomite empire, or I should say the Western civilization today, as it's called, the so-called white world. So let's go back now. I'm going to get this out one more time to Joel. And you're going to read verse 6 and 7 this time. Chapter 3, verse 6 and 7.
Okay. Amazing. Joel chapter 3, verse 6. The children also of Judah and the children of Jerusalem have ye sold unto the Grecians, that you might remove them far from their border.
And that was the intention, to remove us on the other side of the world from our land. Go ahead.
Verse 7. Behold, I will raise them out of the place whither you have sold them.
So where did listen, first of all, like I said, verse 6 said the Greeks. But who was it? Was it actually the Greeks? No, it was the Brits, the Spanish, the French, the Portuguese, the Dutch that sold us to their own colonists. It was the Africans that sold us to the Greeks that removed us to what? The colonies of our lands that were being conquered. Our families of Issachar, Asher, Zebulun, Naphtali, Gad, Reuben, right? All of us. And so this is the Most High telling us this is this one and the same person. So Amayetazah, now go back to Revelation chapter 13. What was the whole purpose of that? To show you that when it says the Greeks, it's talking about when it says the leopard. Get that again, Amayetazah. Read chapter 13 of Revelation and verse 2 again.
Revelation chapter 13 and verse 2. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. So
this is talking about the Greek world developed into all of its other so-called European families. Asiatic families, because Russia is not a part of Europe. Russia is northern Asia, the northernmost part of Asia, right? And that's why the border between them and Eastern Europe, and sometimes Turkey is referred to as Eurasia. So, Amayetazah, read on down. Now we're still in the second half of the last third of verse 2. Go ahead.
And the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority.
So the dragon here in Revelation chapter 13 and verse 2 is a different dragon than the dragon in Revelation chapter 12. Now, this is something that's important because it's going to help you be able to distinguish from here on out. Whenever you hear about the dragon, how do you know when you're reading it? Are you reading about the earthly entity? Let's say, are you reading about the spiritual demon Satan, which is who it is right here in this verse 2, or its earthly counterpart? The earthly,
Said he gave him power.
Yeah, no, but I'm saying, how do you know which one is being spoken of? I'm going to show what I mean. Let's go to chapter 12 real quick, Amayetazah, and read verse 3.
Revelation chapter 12 and verse 3. And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his heads.
Stop right there. So how do you know the one that is the earthly entity from the one that is the spiritual entity? The one that is the earthly entity is described not only as the dragon, but what? It has the qualities, the characteristics, right? The traits. It's described just like the earthly entity in Revelation chapter 13 and verse 1. It has 7 heads and 10 horns. That's how you know it's talking about the earthly entity. It's talking about, but it shows you that the Greco-Roman Empire and all of the families that grew out of it, the Most High referred to them as the dragon. But they're the earthly dragon. Just listen, don't be shocked because you have the sons of God. The sons of God are what? Are the Israelites. But there's also a spiritual sons of God. Remember when in chapter 19, when the angel brought these things to John, and John went to bow down, and what did the angel tell John? He said, "Don't see that thou doest not. Don't worship me." He says, "I am of your brothers and your co-servants, your co-laborers that have the testimony of Christ." Worship God. So and so that's why when people read Genesis chapter 6, and it says that the sons of God looked upon the daughters of men and saw that they were fair, they be talking about the Nephilim. Ain't no Nephilim. I was telling brothers from the other congregation, those are the Negrolim. Those was Israelites that began to do what? That began to go and mingle with all the daughters of the other groups of people during the time of Adam that the Most High forbade us. So here, the dragon in Genesis, the dragon in the dragon in Revelation chapter 13, having what? Having 7 heads and 10 horns, is what? Is in reference to the very same nation, the very same nation of people, right, that we're reading about in chapter 13, the Greco-Roman Empire and all of those powerful families, and not as powerful families as what's talking about in certain capacity of the 10 horns. In the ancient days, the 10 horns was the 10 provinces of the Roman Empire. In the modern days, the 10 horns are a group of those European nations that once held, many of them, not all, but many of them once held that position as a head. And then after they lost the position, the geopolitical position of being the preeminent nation in Europe, then they fell back into a status that the Most High described as one of the 10 horns. So Amayetazah, let's go back and let's read now and break down that last third of verse 2. So read it again. And the dragon did what?
And the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority.
So when it says the dragon, this is talking about to the Edomite nation, the spiritual demon Satan gave when it says power, it's talking just that. It's talking about that spiritual power and that what? That wherewithal to get things done, to perform. Just like when Christ came, the Most High sent Christ to gather 12 apostles. And then after so much, or I should say, he gathered 12 disciples that would become apostles, that would become teachers. But what happened? He started off teaching them, and then what happened? He gave them power to do his will. Did he not? Let's go read that real quick. I'm trying to show you what this is saying. But everything that the Most High was doing through Christ and his apostles, Satan have been doing it now that this world is his, through his apostles on the earth. So when you read Matthew chapter 10, Amayetazah, as a matter of fact, do me a favor. I want to, let's read this one. First, let's read Matthew chapter 10, and you're going to read verses 1 through 7. Matthew chapter 10, verses 1 through 7, Amayetazah.
Okay. Matthew chapter 10, verse 1. And when he had called unto him his 12 disciples, he gave them power against unclean spirits, to cast them out and to heal all manner of sickness and all manner of disease.
Now, this was Christ, who was ordained by the Heavenly Father to choose these 12 men. These 12 men were chosen by the Most High, and he gave them power so that he could what? So that he could do their, so that they could perform his will. Then when they left, or I should say when Christ, went through his passion, falsely accused, crucified, resurrected, then he gave them his seat, meaning what? His position on earth. And authority, right? Meaning what? Authorization to do all of those things. Now, just take that. That's on the right-hand side. Well, the same thing was happening and is happening on the left-hand side. So continue to read, Amayetazah. This actually, read on down, just that was verse 1.
Correct.
Read verse 1 and 2 only. We don't even have to read all the way to 7, because I'm trying to provide verses that are the equivalent on the right-hand side of what this is telling us on the left-hand side in Revelation chapter 13. So go ahead, read that again. Matthew chapter 1, verse 1 and 2.
Matthew chapter 10 and verse 1.
Matthew chapter 10, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And when he had called unto him his 12 disciples, he gave them power against unclean spirits to cast them out and to heal all manner of sickness and all manner of disease. Now the names of the 12 apostles are these.
Good. Then verse 1 is even, that's just good. That's perfect. Now find the one where it tells you that Christ had 70 secret apostles, and he did the same. 70 secret disciples, or it says 70 secret apostles, and he sent them out 2 by 2. Did I drink my water? Shit, no. Anybody know what that is? Well, it says he called unto himself 70 secret disciples.
Luke chapter 10, verse 1.
Okay, let's go there. Luke chapter 10. Okay. Go ahead and just read verse 1 for now.
Okay. Luke chapter 10, verse 1. After these things, the Lord appointed other 70 also, and sent them 2 and 2 before his face, into every city and place, whither he himself would come.
Okay. Now, jump down and read verse 8 and 9.
Verse 8. And into whatsoever city you enter, and they receive you, eat such things as are set before you, and heal the sick that are therein, and say unto them, the kingdom of the Most High is come nigh unto you.
Okay, now from there, jump down to verse 17.
Verse 17. And the 70 returned again with joy, saying, Lord, even the devils are subject unto us through thy name.
Now listen, why do we go there? So that you can see that these 70 got the same power as the initial what? 12. So Christ was choosing himself apostles. He was choosing himself disciples, and he was endowing them with the spiritual power to perform that which was his Father's will. And that's what he was endowed with. Now, when you go back to Revelation chapter 13, it's telling you that what? That this empire, born out of the Greco-Roman Empire, all of the 7, according to John's vision, 7 heads, meaning the 7 dominant empires out of the Edomite nation, they were all given this spiritual power to perform the satanic deeds on earth. Now let's go back to, now we're going to break down the left-hand side and how that works. So, go back to Revelation chapter 13 and read the whole verse 2. Understanding that we're focusing, y'all, on that last third about where it picks up with the dragon. Revelation chapter 13 and verse 2.
Revelation chapter 13 and verse 2. And the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority.
Now, so that means these people got, what? Well, you guys think somebody just go to bed and get this bright idea and they come, now I'll get up in the morning and build a bomb? Satan was working through, what's this cat's name with the wild ass hair? Einstein. That's who it was. It was Satan. And everybody that was involved in the Manhattan Project to bring forth the first atomic bomb. And then when they went and broke, and they did that one through fission or fusion. The difference between atomic energy and nuclear energy is fission and fusion, which I ain't going to even start trying to explain. The point is, all of that was being given to them by Satan. People don't believe that, but that's what it was. That's how they ended up being what? The preeminent nation militarily in the world. So let's read about that. Let's read about how these people, now, so when it says his power, it's talking about that virtue, that satanic virtue. When it says his what? His seat, meaning his position, and I'm gonna prove that. Why does it say his seat? Because Satan has to have what? A representative, a physical conduit on this earth. And that physical conduit of his spiritual presence is Esau. Now Satan says that himself. Now was that Matthew or is that Luke? Luke chapter 7 and start off at verse 1. It's going to be maybe all the way down to verse 4. Only one that where Satan tells, where Satan offers Christ, where Satan makes Christ an offer he can't refuse. That he did refuse. Go ahead. Luke chapter 7. I would say 7, but it's actually Luke chapter 4. It's Luke chapter 4.
Luke chapter 4, verse 1. And Yahushua, being full of the Holy Spirit, returned from Jordan and was led by the Spirit into the wilderness, being 40 days tempted of the devil. And in those days he did eat nothing. And when they were ended, he afterward hungered.
So Christ was what? Physically weak. This is where Satan's like, okay, I got him now. Go ahead.
And the devil, verse 3, and the devil said unto him, If thou be the Son of the Most High, command this stone that it be made bread. And Yahushua answered him, saying, It is written that man shall not live by bread alone.
So Satan is trying to get Christ to use his powers, the virtue that he was endowed with by the Most High, for something other than what he was sent to use it for. What was Christ sent to use his virtue for? To heal, the same thing that he sent the apostles out, to heal the sick, to cleanse the lepers, to raise up the dead. And in doing so, those works would manifest him as the Messiah that was previously spoken of as the Messiah that was to come. So he wasn't here to use his power for any fleshly or selfish purpose. And that's what Satan was trying to get him to do. Satan was trying to have Christ exercise a misappropriation or misallocation of the virtue that the Most High gave him. All right? So Christ says, nope. And then he went scriptures. Christ defeated him with the scriptures. Now, what is the next attack? What's the next approach? Continue on, Yetazar.
Verse 5. And the devil, taking him up into an high mountain, showed unto him all the kingdoms of the world in a moment of time.
Imagine that, somebody. Imagine if somebody could take you to the highest point where you are and show you, when it says show you all the kingdoms of the world in a moment's time, the reason why it says a moment's time is because Christ was being shown all the future kingdoms that would arise and fall. He gave him a panoramic movie type of view of the glory of the world in his time. Now watch what Satan says to him. So Christ is seeing the Romans, he's seeing the Spanish, the French, the Germans, the Russians, the Britons, he's seeing America, he's seeing the rise of the Asian kingdoms and the cats of the great Khans, you know, that took down the Chinese, the Mongolians, and he's seeing all of this. Now watch what he tells Christ. Now he's going to make his pitch. Go ahead.
Verse 6. And the devil said unto him, All this power will I give thee.
Hold on. This is what we just read about how Esau got it. He took Christ up and showed him. He said, all of this power will I give you. Go ahead, Yetazar.
All this power will I give thee, and the glory of them.
And all, when it says the glory, I mean all the recognition, because that's what glory is. Glory is recognition for what it is you have, or for what it is you do, or for what it is, what your feats are. It's called, today they call it fame. But in the old days, it was called glory. So all of this power and glory will I give you. Go ahead.
For that is delivered unto me.
He listened to what Satan said. He said, because that's been given to me. Satan is telling Christ, this is mine now. This earth belongs to me. Go ahead, Yetazar.
And unto whomsoever I will, I give it.
And unto whomsoever I want to, I give it. But it comes at a cost. And what is that cost? Go ahead.
Verse 7. If thou therefore wilt worship me, all shall be thine.
So if you worship me now, and then it's not, and that's backed up. When I say that's backed up, Satan said, all this will I give thee, for it is given unto me. Now, where do we read that at? Let's go to real quick. Let's go to Job chapter 9, verse 24. Job chapter 9, verse 24. Let me ask y'all this. Do you understand what I'm doing with you with Revelation chapter 13? I'm not just giving you the breakdown. I'm sure I'm giving you the scriptures that help you to be able to teach people using the scriptures to logically what? To use reason. I guess reason is a better word because that's the word that the Most High used. In Isaiah chapter 1 and 19, come and let us reason together. The Bible has a reasoning to it. The storyline is based on a sound reason. The reason is embedded in what the Most High's purpose is. So it makes sense. And so these verses help you to be able, for instance, when somebody said, well, the dragon gave him his power, what is that? Well, now we know that there is a spiritual force that the world has been given to, and that he does give it to whomsoever he will if you worship him. You understand? So in order for the beast to have gotten that power, meaning the Edomite kingdom, the Edomite nation, that means the Edomite nation and all of those kingdoms that arose out of it are what? Are satanic. Because that's the only way you can get it. That's what it's talking about. Their spiritual source, that's how they've maintained themselves as the preeminent kingdom, the preeminent culture or civilization on this earth. That's how they've done it, through Satan. So the question is, read that on me, it's at Job chapter 9, verse 24, who gave it to the spiritual demon?
Job chapter 9, verse 24. The earth is given into the hand of the wicked. He covereth the faces of the judges thereof. If not, where and who is he?
Yeah, the earth is given into the hand of the wicked. And what he's done since he got it, he's covered the faces of the judges, meaning the people on the earth don't recognize who the true judges are. The true judges are the people that receive the laws of the Most High, the Israelites. But the Israelites' faces have been covered up by what? By propaganda that they call art, false images, right? False historical claims on who we are. Most of it, not all, but most of it is the product of the let me put it like this, of the cultural aspect of the Renaissance. The Renaissance had cultural implications. The Renaissance had spiritual implications. The Renaissance had military, all of that, right? Financial implications. What were the financial implications of the Renaissance? How was the Renaissance financed? Through the wealth of the New World that they came and conquered. When you read the stories, and I shouldn't say the story, the history, it tells you that's how Europe financed the Renaissance, by all the gold and silver and all of the different things, the dainties that were being brought from the Americas, like the cacao, the sugar cane, the tobacco, gold, silver, precious stones. So that was now, but during that very same time, what were the cultural implications? The cultural implications of the Renaissance was that one civilization came to another part of the world and over a period of time, through brutality and religion, imposed this culture on the other people. That's why we look and we think when people say, oh, Jesus, they got this image, they don't have the true image of Christ in their head, because there was a cultural campaign that was imposed in what? On a religious platform. It came with the cross and the image that was universally used. They took the same cross and the same image to Africa. They took the same cross and the same image to Indonesia. Everywhere where Christianity is, you ain't got no different image of Jesus. You got the same one that the Spanish brought in 1492. You got the same one that the Portuguese brought. You got the same one that the French brought. You got the same one that the British brought. You got the same one that the Dutch brought. The Germans, they all took the same image. And so that's when it says he covered the faces of the judges. That's how the faces of the judges were covered, through lies. But once again, the earth is given into the hand of the wicked. Now, who gave it to him? That's the question. We know that Satan gives it to those on earth, but who gave it to Satan? And you know what? We got to go to Daniel chapter 4 and verse 17 for that one. Are you with us, Amayatazar? Then I'm going to have to get it. Oh, there he is. Daniel chapter 7, Daniel chapter 4 and verse 17.
Daniel chapter 4, verse 17.
Daniel chapter 4 and verse 17.
Okay. Daniel chapter 4 and verse 17. This matter is by the decree of the watchers.
The watchers are the angels. This matter. Now, what he knows the concept that he's introducing to us. This matter is by the decree of the watchers. Go ahead.
And the demand by the word of the holy ones.
The demand is what? At what the Most High demands. The Most High demands that people on earth know this by the decree of his angels. What is it that he wants us to know? Go ahead.
To the intent that the living may know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men.
That the Lord ruleth in the kingdom of men. So he's the one that gave it to Satan. The Most High gave this kingdom to Satan. Listen, continue, finish the verse up.
And giveth it to whomsoever he will.
Oh, but hold on. Wait a minute. Didn't Satan just utter those words to Christ? And to whomsoever I will, I give it? Because the Most High gave it to Satan to do so. And this error has been called what? Who knows what this error is called? It is called the time of the Gentiles. Every Gentile nation that has ruled since the fall of Israel has ruled under Satan. Who was given authority over the earth by the Most High until the time of the Gentiles be fulfilled. Let's go get that. Then we'll get back to chapter 13. So let's do that. Let's go to 2. Let's first go to Luke chapter 21. I want you to get the verse. Maybe it's going to start off at verse 20, but I want you to get the verse. That says, and they shall fall by the edge of the sword. Right? Luke chapter 21. I know the verse is going to be 21, but I want you to read a little above. Therefore, when you shall see the Roman army, it might be verse 19 that you start off at.
Luke 21, you said?
Uh-huh.
Verse 19. In your patience possess ye your soul.
What verse does it start off where it says, when you shall see the armies? In verse 20. That's what I said before. Go ahead.
Verse 20. Yeah. Luke chapter 21 and verse 20. And when you shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies, then know that the desolation thereof is nigh.
Now, I made a misstatement. I should clear it up. Israel, we were no longer sovereign during the time of the Romans. The rule of the Gentiles officially came into power at the time. In other words, the world was officially completely handed over to the Gentiles at the time of the Babylonians. Israel was still what? The nation of Israel, the kingdom of Judah, was still sovereign. The northern kingdom of Israel, we had two kingdoms, Israel and Judah, the north and the south, and we were both sovereign until the Most High had the Assyrians take us in the north away. And so there remained Judah, still a sovereign nation, and the Most High working through and willing to abide in Israel as long as we do what? As long as we follow his commandments. But when Judah abandoned those commandments, then the Most High gave the world entirely up to the who? To the Gentiles with the Babylonians. We were finally out of power. We had no kings coming out of us that would sit on another throne. After the Babylonians, the Persians would come, and they would be succeeded by the Greeks, and who would put particular hell on us. And they would be succeeded by the Romans, who would put a full end to us. So that's truly when the time of the Gentiles began, really between the Assyrian and the Babylonian Empire. Okay, Amayetazar. So this right here that he's reading in verse 20 is Christ preparing those followers who, after his absence, right, would recognize these signs and know when to leave Jerusalem. What Christ is describing would take place 37 years after his ascension, after his crucifixion, his resurrection, and then he ascended. Then this happened. Continue on, as I read it from the top of 20 again.
Luke chapter 21, verse 20. And when you shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies, then know that the desolation thereof is nigh.
Now, when did the armies of the Romans begin to surround Jerusalem? During the time of Nero, and then after Nero. When Nero, when he decided he was going to put the Zeus inside the temple and then raise taxes, Israel revolted and went off. We went off. So he had to call his top general Vespasian out of retirement. And Vespasian came down with his legions, and a couple of legions joined him from Syria, and another couple of legions came in from and surrounded Israel for 7 years. And this is what he said: when you see that process underway, get out while you can. Go ahead, Amiyatazar.
Verse 21. Then let them which are in Judea flee to the mountains.
The mountains mean the kingdom. Like when you read Daniel chapter, what is it? Jeremiah chapter 51, the Most High refers to Babylon as a destroying mountain. When you read Isaiah chapter 2, verses 1 through 5, Micah chapter 4, verses 1 through 4, the Most High prophesies about Israel being raised up and being the tallest mountain among all the mountains and the hills. Meaning what? The nation is going to be raised up and placed above all the other nations. So he's telling us to flee into the nation. But which nation did we flee into? We fled into the continent. When you study where the legions were arriving from, there was no place to run but south. And that's what we had the history. You read Isaiah chapter 30 and 31, we always had the history of going into Egypt. So this is what Christ was telling. Christ himself, his parents had to flee to Egypt when he was born, if you guys can remember. Matthew chapter 2. Go ahead, Amiyatazar.
And verse 21 from the top. Then let them which are in Judea flee to the mountains, and let them which are in the midst of it depart out.
Everybody that's inside Judea, leave. Go ahead.
And let not them that are in the countries enter thereinto.
Why does he say let them that are in the countries? Because when you read Acts chapter 2, remember at the day of Pentecost, all of those Israelites that were there at the when the apostles began to speak in their languages in Acts chapter 2, they had came out from all those countries that you read in that chapter. Parthia, Egypt, Cyrene, Arabia, but they were coming back for their festivals. Christ said, from the outside, once you see these Roman soldiers mobilizing, heading for Jerusalem, he said, those that are in the countries, do not go back in, stay out. If you're there and you see this happening, unfolding, leave. But if you notice this dynamic underway, this mobilization of Roman troops underway from afar, stay out. Go ahead.
Verse 22. For these be the days of vengeance, that all things which are written may be fulfilled.
That means the Most High is getting ready to take vengeance like he promised us in Deuteronomy chapter 28. Go ahead.
Verse 23. But woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days.
Go ahead.
For there shall be great distress in the land, and wrath upon this people. And they shall fall by the edge of the sword.
So the Most High in distress and wrath, that was him bringing it on us. We fell by the edge of the sword. Go ahead.
And shall be led away captive into all nations. And Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles, until the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled.
And that's where we are now. So Satan, having received this world, it still belongs to the Most High. But after he falls, then the Most High is going to raise up his righteous sons, put them over it, and and give them power and his seat and his authority. It's the same thing. It's just the time of the wicked. And this is what it means in 2nd Ezra chapter 6 when it says, for Esau is the end of the world. So all we're doing is putting some meat on the bones. That is that parable. And Satan and the devil and the dragon gave him power and his seat and great authority. But all he did was give him what the Most High had given to Israel that we forfeited through our disobedience. And so how did we forfeit it? By tapping into the side that wasn't meant for us. We weren't meant to rule by the dragon. But we started what? Tapping into and acquiring spiritual power and evil from the dragon. And that's why the Most High threw us down, because he already had a nation. He already had our twin brother nation who was already designated for that. That the Most High would teach the world a great lesson in the what? In the fruits of evil using Esau. We weren't meant for that. And we kept on insisting to play that what? To play that part. So the Most High had to move us out the equation and punish us and teach us a lesson for a couple of thousand years. Now, Amayetazah, it says, in Jerusalem shall be trodden down of the Gentiles until the time of the Gentiles be fulfilled. I want you to get one more in the book of Romans chapter 11, and you're going to read verse 26. And then we're going to go back. In other words, all of this is to show you that what? The world is given to Satan by the Most High. Satan gives it to whoever he will on this earth under the condition that you worship him, and that this era is the time of the Gentiles, all the other nations. So Esau, the beast with 7 heads and 10 horns, is the last of the rule of the Gentiles. And he's ruled specifically under Satan. Go ahead, Amayetazah. So read this last one concerning the times that we're living in and what transition we're in. So go ahead and read that. Romans 11 and verse 26. Is it 26?
And so all Israel shall be saved.
No, that's the one. I want the one, verse 24. It says, be not ignorant. I would not have you ignorant, is what it says. That blindness in part is come to Israel until the time of the Gentiles be fulfilled.
Verse 25.
There you go.
Romans 11, verse 25. For I would not, brethren, that you should be ignorant of this mystery.
I mean, it's necessary that you understand this has been a mystery all of these years. That what?
Lest you should be wise in your own conceits. That blindness in part is happened to Israel unto the fullness of the Gentiles be come in.
Yeah, until the Gentiles fulfill their predetermined time. And so, now let's go back on the Yetazah, and for the last time, we're going to do what? We're going to read the last section of we're going to read all of verse 2 again, chapter 13 of Revelation, and we'll be done with it. And let me say this. This is how these breakdowns is going to go with this apocalyptic blitz. Because you're going to be getting other brothers, whether in Israel or religion, they be just making stuff up and they don't go to the Bible. The Bible breaks itself down. You guys are seeing that. Now it's crystal clear that the dragon in Revelations chapter 13 is the spiritual demon Satan. But the dragon in chapter 12 is actually the beast with 7 heads and 10 horns in chapter 13. In other words, you have an earthly entity, and that earthly entity is the physical conduit of the power of the spiritual demon. So go ahead, Amayetazah, chapter 13 and verse 2 one last time.
Revelation 13 and verse 2. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority.
Right. Now stop. So let's finally get the description of this. The 7 heads are the 7 most powerful empires to emerge out of the Edomite nation. And so the first one definitely is the Greeks, because it makes reference to that twice. Daniel's chapter what? Daniel chapter 7, and right here in Revelation chapter 13 and verse 2. But then what was another head? The head that emerged right after them, that they went on and conquered and then usurped or annexed all of those former Greek territories. It was the Romans. But something funny happened with the Romans. Go ahead, Amayetazah, read verse 3.
Verse 3. And I saw one of his heads, as it were, wounded to death.
Stop. The wound of the Roman Empire was what? We're going to get some other verses that show you this too. Like I said, now, listen, now we're in verse 3, and we got to break it down. We got to strip all the meat off of these bones. So we know that the Romans were the second head, but that head was wounded in 476 AD, the fall of the Roman Empire by the Visigoths that had sacked it on 2 occasions before, I think 410, 411, 407 or something like that. Amayatazah, the Visigoths, V-I-S, right? Look that up, V-I-S-I-G-O-T-H-S, when they sacked Rome. It was twice, maybe even 3 times before 476. It's like 407. The first one to do it was Alaric. Let's see what it says. Sack of Rome. There you go, 410. It's like I said it, but it was a couple of times. Let me see. The sack of Rome on 24th August. Does it mention, it doesn't say what you call it, huh? It doesn't mention Alaric.
It does.
Huh? Does it?
Yeah.
The sack of Rome on the 24th of August, 14 AD, was undertaken by the Visigoths, led by the king Alaric. Yeah, and listen, all these, you look at all these white folks. These was black folks. At the time, Rome was at that time, Rome was no longer the capital of the Western Roman Empire, having been replaced in that position first by Mediolanum in 286, and then by Ravenna in 402. So now go look up the fall of the Roman Empire in 476 AD. I don't know if Theodosius or his son, I think it was Theodosius' son, who was the last emperor of the empire of the city of Rome, the capital of Rome. But look for that, because this is when they, now, what we gonna do? We're gonna get other prophecies that demonstrate the same thing, y'all. And then when we go to break down other chapters, we're gonna end up using this one, chapter 13, to help break them down. So of course, there will be like a part 2 and 3 probably to this one. But these are the days that we're living in now. So, you know, the actual, we're not even in the days of the feet anymore. We're in the days of the toes. Toes. We're talking about, remember the image in Daniel chapter 2. The toes that were partly iron and partly miry clay because of the division of the kingdom and having mingled themselves among the nations. That's why it says they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men. I mean, they brought all these other kingdoms, all these other seeds of different nations among them. And there's no way in the world that they can look or cater to the best interests of each different culture, lying about it being a melting pot. And there's so much of a melting pot, that's why you got all of Chinatown by itself. So much of a melting pot, that's why you got all of Koreatown by itself, little Tokyo by itself. That's a lie. You got it on me, Yetazar?
In September 476 AD, the last Roman emperor of the West, Romulus Augustulus.
Okay, then that was Romulus Augustus, then that was Theodosius' son. But they don't have nothing that you could put up there?
It's a long article.
Just put it up there so they could, boy, I guess then they could pause it when they watch it. Oh, so I see what you're saying. It's like a whole lot, it's a long text.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's okay, that's cool.
Okay,
Yeah, Romulus Augustus.
So they can text it. They can.
You can put it in the chat room, right?
There's only like one person in the chat or 2 people.
Okay, fine. Let's go on and read, man. So anyway, I ain't trying to make life hard on y'all yet. I mean, after all, it's the internet. Only so much can be done, brother. I mean, I don't even know how to do it myself. So why would I put you through some? Yeah, see that? There you go. In September 70 In September 476 AD, the last Roman emperor of the West, Romulus Augustulus, was deposed by a Germanic prince called Odovacar. We call him Odoacer out here, who had won control of the remnants of the Roman army of Italy. He then sent the Western imperial regalia to Constantinople. So there you have it. All right. So that is that deadly wound. All right, y'all. Now read that verse again, only up to that point, because now we gonna cover the first half where other verses they prophesy about the same event, but in a different way. So go ahead, Amiyatazar, read that again. That's chapter 13 of Revelation and verse 3.
Yeah. Revelation 13 and verse 3. And I saw one of his heads, as it were, wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed.
Okay, stop right there. So we're going to deal with just the death. So what is this talking about? This is talking about in the trajectory, right? The geopolitical trajectory of the so-called, of the Edomite civilization, the so-called white world. The Greeks came on the scene, were superseded and by a more powerful force, their cousins, their brothers, the Romans. But then the Romans suffered a deadly wound. Now he already read it where it says the deadly wound was healed. But first, before we get to the deadly wound being healed, let's go and read other prophecies about this phenomenon that this happened. Now, where else can you find this? Let's first go to Second Esdras. Let's go to Second Esdras, chapter 12. And Amiyatazar, you're going to start off at verse 10. And only read down, let me tell you what, you're only going to read down to verse 18. Now, before you read chapter 12, what did I say, chapter 10? What did I say, chapter 12? Before you read chapter 12, let's qualify this as the fourth beast. You guys know that we're reading, like we said in verse 1 and 2 of Revelation 13. Revelation 13 and verse 1 and 2 is the equivalent of Daniel chapter 7, verse 6 and 7. The Greco-Roman Empire, which is the third beast in Daniel chapter 7, the Greeks, and the fourth beast in Daniel chapter 7, the what? The Romans. But the Romans would go through this strange dynamic, political dynamic that's prophesied over and over again. So first we're going to go to chapter 11 and identify the fourth beast in Daniel chapter, the fourth beast of Daniel chapter 7. So Amiyatazar, first you're going to read chapter 11 and verses 36 all the way to verse 40. Second Esdras, chapter 11, verse 36 to verse 40. Then we'll go to chapter 12 and read that dynamic. Matter of fact, I'm gonna use the restroom. I'll be right back. Hold up. Yeah, I came back and my internet had gone out again. I thought I was going to be free from that this evening. Can you hear me, bro?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, we're getting ready to start at 2nd Ezra chapter 11 and read verses 36 through 40. Just trying to get to what? The dynamic that's prophesied in Revelations chapter 13 and verse 3, and to show you that this is prophesied in multiple places. So this is one of them. Go ahead, Amiyatazar.
Okay. 2nd Ezra chapter 11, verse 36. Then I heard a voice which said unto me, Look before thee, and consider the thing that thou seest.
You know
And
what?
I beheld.
I'm sorry. First, we have to orient ourselves. You got to read verse 1 of this chapter first, verse 1 and 2. All right.
2nd Ezra chapter 11, verse 1. Then saw I a dream, and behold, there came up from the sea an eagle, which had 12 feathered wings and 3 heads.
So y'all see that, right? 12 feathered wings and 3 heads. An eagle. Long story short, the 3 heads represent. Now here, this is the same entity that we're reading about. Let me put it like this. I can't say that entirely. Excuse me. This that we're reading about now is the same entity in chapter 13, minus the Greeks. Minus the Greeks. This right here is specifically from the time of the 12 Caesars on to the fall of the complete European civilization, of the complete Edomite Empire. But this one is focusing on the development, right, of the eagle from the Romans on. Remember, the Greeks are the ones that are who the Most High introduced to the world, the Edomite empires. And then in chapter 13, we find out that one of those heads received a deadly wound. Well, this is that second head. So read it again on the Yetzirah, verse 1 and 2, and then you can jump down to verse 36.
2nd Ezra chapter 11, verse 1. Then saw I a dream, and behold, there came up from the sea an eagle, which had 12 feathered wings and 3 heads. And I saw, and behold, she spread her wings over all the earth, and all the winds of the air blew on her, and were gathered together. So
this is talking about this eagle now, arising and doing what? And taking control of the whole world over a period of time. Go ahead, I'm gonna get this. Now jump on down to verse 36. So this eagle right here is picking it up, is taking Daniel chapter, and actually once we finish Revelations chapter 13, this is where we're coming, because it's the next logical order. It's the development of the Edomite nation after the Greeks. And so there were the Romans, and then the Romans fell, and then we'll explain the rest as we move forward. So go ahead, Amiyatazar, verse 36.
Verse 36. Then I heard a voice which said unto me, Look before thee, and consider the thing that thou seest. And I beheld, and lo, as it were a roaring lion, chased out of the wood. And I saw that he sent out a man's voice unto the eagle, and said,
Now listen, so the lion represents Christ, the Israelites, and the voice of a man is the prophets that the Most High been using to prophesy about the condemnation, about Esau's what? Perdition, about Esau's end. Go ahead.
Verse 38. Hear thou, I will talk with thee, and the highest shall say unto thee, art not thou it that remainest of the four beasts, whom I made to reign in my world, that the end of their times might come through them?
So the Most High said the end of the times of the world was intended, was Esau was the one who was designated. This eagle was the one who was designated to bring the time of the four kingdoms, in other words, the Gentiles, to an end. So that's, in other words, he's telling us about what? When he says, art not thou it that remainest of the four beasts, where did we learn about the four beasts? We learned about the four beasts in Daniel chapter 7. So the reason why he's saying it like that is because in Daniel chapter 7, the fourth beast wasn't attributed to any animal. The first beast was a lion with eagle's wings, which represented the Babylonians. The second beast was a bear that had two sides, one side higher, which symbolized the Persian and Median Empire. The leopard that in chapter 7 and verse 6 that symbolized the Greeks. But remember, it didn't give us an animal or the image of a beast in Romans. In Daniel chapter 7 verse 7. It just gave a description of its ferocity. It said that it had great iron teeth, that it stamped the residue of the other kingdoms with its feet, right? But it didn't, and that it had what? It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and that it had 10 horns, but it didn't say that it was what? Nothing. But here it's letting us know it was an eagle all along. And that's what makes it so profound. Because why? Because that's the actual emblem that the Romans took on, the eagle. And everybody, I would say they made movies about it, the eagle, Centurion, all of these movies. A Gladiator, you always see that Roman eagle. Go ahead, Amiyatazar.
Verse 40. And the fourth came and overcame all the beasts that were past.
Reiterating the fourth beast, the eagle being the fourth beast, that it would come and destroy all the kingdoms that were before it. Go ahead.
And had power over the world with great fearfulness, and over the whole compass of the earth with much wicked oppression.
Now this shows you, when it says the whole compass of the earth, the term compass means to surround. So that means this is the one kingdom that grew to what? To have control over the entire globe as they do today. But they're not called Rome. We'll get to that process later. Go ahead, I'm going to get to that from verse 40 again, the top.
Verse 40. And the fourth came and overcame all the beasts that were past, and had power over the world with great fearfulness, and over the whole compass of the earth with much wicked oppression. And so long time dwelt he upon the earth with deceit. All
right, so it's talking about the eagle. Now let's go get the breakdown in chapter 12. And start off on the Yetazah at verse 10. And we're only going to read as far as verse 18, of course, verse by verse, okay?
Yep. Second Esdras chapter 12 and verse 10. And he said unto me, this is the interpretation of the vision. The eagle whom thou sawest come up from the sea is the kingdom which was seen in the vision of thy brother Daniel.
Now you notice in Daniel chapter 7, Daniel saw 4 great beasts rise up from the sea. We just read in Revelations chapter 13 that John, the Revelator, saw a beast with 7 heads and 10 horns rise up from the sea. We just read in chapter 11 of 2nd Esdras, verse 1, that an eagle rose up from the sea. The sea represents the collective of all humanity, the collective of all nations. And from among the nations, from among all humanity, what? That these empires would arise, each one carrying their cultural emblem. Go ahead on the Yetazah. So the eagle whom thou sawest come up from the sea is the kingdom which was seen in the vision of thy brother Daniel. That means what? And then we read the verse in chapter 11. It says it was the eagle, and it says it was the 4th beast. So that's Daniel chapter 7, verse 7. Go ahead.
Verse 12. But it was not expounded unto him, Therefore, now I declare it unto thee.
So the Most High said, yeah, but I didn't give Daniel much detail, but now I'm going to give it to you. Go ahead.
Verse 13. Behold, the days will come that there shall rise up a kingdom upon earth, and it shall be feared above all the kingdoms that were before it.
Talking about the Roman Empire. Go ahead.
Verse 14. In the same shall 12 kings reign, one after another.
So these kings is talking about from the dictator, the self-proclaimed dictator, Julius Caesar, all the way to which was what? Julius Caesar was on the BC side. So you're talking about between 49 and 45 BC, right? 49 to 44 BC. All the way to the Emperor Domitian, right? Domitian was he ruled from 81 to 96 AD. You got it, Amayetazar? Beautiful. Yeah, but this one got Augustus. Augustus here is the second one. They have it, you see this, the first century? And then they have Nerva. They have Nerva as the 12th. Let's examine this. Not sure how this one is wrong. You know how you can show this list is wrong? Because the Bible says, let's read what it says in the Apocrypha. It says, verse 14, in the same shall 12 kings reign, one after another. Now, how do you know this list is not the right one? Because when you look at it, it says in verse 15, whereof the second shall begin to reign and shall have more time than any of the 12. And when you look at this one, the first one on this list has way more than anybody else because they're not including Julius Caesar. Julius was the first. Julius was the one that took it from being a what? A republic that exercised imperial practices like conquering people, setting up kings that they wanted to rule and having them pay tribute and taking everybody into slavery. That was what Rome was doing, but they were doing that under the Senate. And so the people that had the final say so were consuls, right? Meaning that'd be the equivalent of the president today, a consulate. And so you had Julius was a co-consul. He was a part of the first triumvirate. When I say triumvirate, meaning the body of three people that were co-consuls. Julius Caesar, you had trying to think of the guy's name. Crassus, Marcus Crassus, the richest man in all of the Roman Republic. And then you had Gnaeus Magnus Pompey. Those were the first what? The first triumvirate. And they were all co-consuls. It was as if, imagine if America right now had two presidents. If this shit, excuse my expression, but that's the only way I can kind of describe it. This political shit never clears up, and Joe Biden is inaugurated, but Trump doesn't step down. You would actually have two presidents, right? And then the one party recognizing this president as their own, while the other party recognizing that president as their own. Between the three consuls, they all represented a certain demographic that pleased them. The rich and the aristocracy, you know, they clave to Crassus, the richest man in Rome. But Gnaeus Pompey, this dude was a people person, and Julius was battling for the love of the people in competition with Gnaeus Magnus. The point is, all of that was during the final days of the Roman Republic. Then Julius Caesar defeated Gnaeus Pompey in battle. He didn't kill him. He went off to Egypt, and the Egyptians thought they were doing Rome a favor and decapitated and killed Gnaeus and his family. Shit, I'm getting tired. I start speaking Spanish, I'm getting tired. And then Crassus went to try to overthrow Parthia, and this dude met a vicious death because he was known all over the Roman world and all the provinces for his greed. And so how did he die? Was it the Parthians or the Persians? The Parthians, he went to conquer Parthia, and brother, they filled his head with molten gold.
Oh,
Yeah, that's you know, and you know, it take a lot to melt gold down to liquid. But that's how he died. You came for our gold, here it is. Anyway, so after that dynamic, guess what? Julius Caesar does what's not supposed to be done. He marches his legions and he crosses the point. It's called the Rubicon River, where beyond no troops from any direction and that many miles around was allowed to inside the city of Rome. So he went in because of the stuff that was taking place in Rome, declared himself dictator. And that the Bible is talking about the first king. See, the people that made the list, the list is still up. The people that made that made this list, they're thinking the Bible is saying the 12 Caesars, but it ain't the 12 Caesars. It's the what? The Bible said 12 kings, and they're stuck on the title, the fact that all of these other kings, what? They assumed the Caesar's name as a title. And that's how you know the Romans are part of that family, because that's where the term czars come from. T-Z-A-R. The term Kaiser comes from what? A German term from all of these are ex-Roman provinces. That's how you know the bear represents the Russians and their czars. Anyway, the point is, Amayetazar. So here, read verse 15, read verse 14 and 15 again. 2nd Ezra chapter 12, verse 14 and 15.
2nd Ezra chapter 12, verse 14. In the same shall 12 kings reign, one after another.
So that's what this list shows, but they left out Julius Caesar. They got Augustus Caesar as the first one, and they have, who was it? Trajan after Domitian. Who did they have? Nerva. Was it Nerva on the Yetazan?
No, Nerva was last.
That's what I'm saying on that list, right?
Yeah, it was.
But it's supposed to be from Julius, and you can put that list up again. Yeah, no.
Tiberius.
But no, it's not Tiberius. I'm trying to
Caligula.
But damn it, would you listen to me? It's Julius is the first and Augustus is the second.
Yeah.
Augustus ruled for like what, 37 to 40.
14 AD.
He ruled from 31 to 14 AD. Look at that. The reason they put CE, because this is one of them secular things where they don't use religious terms. So CE means the common era, right? And you'll find other terms that say BCE, before the common era. They don't like to say Christ for some odd, well, for obvious reason. I'm gonna say for some odd reason. So what happens if you take Julius Caesar and you put from 49 AD, before 49 BC, I'm sorry, 49 BC to 44 BC, what do you have? You have, how many years is that? 5 years, 4 or 5 years, right? That's Julius. Then when you put 31, now why does it say 31? If Julius Caesar was taken out in 44 BC, what happened between 44 BC and 31 BC? You had the second triumvirate. You had Augustus, you had, no, it was the second body of 3 Romans that acted as consulates. So you had Augustus Caesar, you had, I'm trying to think of the guy's name, Mark Antony, and then Lepidus. LT, look up the second triumvirate. And I think the third one, the second triumvirate, the third person was Lepidus. I can't, but I'll get that for y'all. So between 44 BC and 31 BC, you had a second triumvirate. You had tumults going. Augustus was in the process of wreaking vengeance on the Senate for having killed his father. You had Brutus that went to battle with Mark Antony and Augustus. Yeah, Mark Antony. That Okay, there I was right, Lepidus. Yeah, we got it right here on the screen. The second triumvirate was a political association of convenience between three of Rome's most powerful figures, Mark Antony, Lepidus, like I said, and Octavian. Octavian here is Augustus. His name was Octavian, and then he took on the name Augustus when he was made. He was the one that was made. What do you call it? Imperator is what the Senate, for fear of their lives, declared Augustus or Octavian of Imperator, right? So thank you, Amiyetazar, for that one. So what happens is you got to put Julius Caesar at the first one. And when you read Julius Caesar, then you'll see that what? That the second one, which is Augustus, he's the cat that ruled longer than, and he had, no one even got up to half of his years. And that's what it tells you here. So let's go with that first list again, but let's understand that instead of Nerva being the last on the list, you have Domitian is the 12th one, and Julius Caesar is the first. Augustus, the one that they're helping, Augustus in the scripture is used to help us orient ourselves to know who the 12 truly are. Why? Because he's the one that had more time than anybody. Let's do some calculations, y'all. Help me out with the math, Amiyetazar. 31 plus 14 is what?
I think I've got 55 years.
That's a long
No,
ass time.
45 years, sorry, 45.
Okay, that's Augustus. Tiberius, from 14 to 37. That's what, 27 years? 23? You see that, right?
Yeah, 23.
Caligula only ruled 4 years, y'all, from 37 to 41. Then you can watch a crazy ass evil pornographic movie about him. Claudius is what? That was that of
13.
13 years. Nero is what?
14.
14 years. Galba, now let me say this, between Galba, Otto, and Vitellius, all these guys is showing you between 1 year, right? Galba was 68 to 69, that's 1 year. But Otto, he only ruled for 8 years, right? Otho, from 4 months, from January to April of 69, the same year that Galba was eliminated. And then Aulus Vitellius, July to December of 69, these cats didn't even rule a year. Then you have Vespasian. Now, what's unique about Vespasian? Vespasian was the cat that took Jerusalem down, him and his son Titus after him. So Vespasian ruled for what, 10 years, right? Titus ruled for 2 years. Domitian ruled for 15 years. And Nerva's not even in it. So you see that, right? Now, let me show you something. Why is this important? Let's read it. Let's read on down. I'm going to get this. You read verse 14 and 15 again, and then read on down.
Okay. 2 Ezra chapter 11, verse 14. In the same shall 12 kings reign, one after another, whereof the second shall begin to reign, and shall have more time than any of the 12.
So if you put Augustus at the top, and you put Tiberius there at the second, Tiberius only ruled 23 years. But the first one here ruled more than anybody. You know why? Because he's not the first. The first is Julius Caesar. Now, when you put Julius Caesar up there and you eliminate Nerva from the bottom, what do you get? You get what fits the prophecy, that the second one will begin to rule, and none of them would have his, and the scriptures tell they wouldn't even have the half of his time. We got to find that. Matter of fact, let's do this, Art. Go back with the chapter 11, right? Listen to this, y'all. Are you there, Amiyetazar?
Yeah, I'm here.
You're going to go to chapter 11, and you're going to read verses 13 to 16. 13 to 17, maybe 18 here also. Go ahead, Art. You're going to read 2 Ezra chapter 11. Now, why is this important? Because we're reading the dynamic that we just read about the head being chopped off. receiving a deadly wound. We ain't got there yet, but while we're here, I'm trying to help you to understand. We're trying to orient ourselves to where we know where we are within this fourth beast. Because this fourth beast is what? It is the beast of Revelation chapter 13. So I hope this ain't confusing y'all. When you go back and you listen to this over and over, you'll be able to put I'm trying to give you everything so that you'll be able to take your time and study and put it all in its place. Go ahead and read that. Chapter 11 of 2nd Ezra, verses 13 to 18.
Verse 13. And so it was that when it rained, the end of it came, and the place thereof appeared no more.
No. I'm sorry. Start off at verse 12. Because what did we read? In verse 1, it says, Then I saw a dream, and behold, there came up from the sea an eagle which had 12 feathered wings and 3 heads. So this is the first feather being arising. Go ahead.
2nd Ezra chapter 11 and verse 12. And I looked, and behold, on the right side there arose one feather, and reigned over all the earth. And so it was that when it rained, the end of it came.
Now, what was this happening? What happened? It said the end of it came. This is talking about the assassination of Julius Caesar in the Roman Senate. Go ahead.
And the place thereof appeared no more. So the next following stood up and reigned and had a great time.
So this is the second one reigning is who? It's Augustus or Octavian, whose name was called Augustus Caesar. And we found out he reigned for 45 years. Now let's see what happened with him. Go ahead.
Verse 14. And it happened that when it rained, the end of it came also, like as the first, so that it appeared no more.
So this is talking about the death of Augustus Caesar. Go ahead.
Verse 15. Then came there a voice unto it and said.
Now listen, this is a voice talking to the second head that just died, or the second feather that just died. Go ahead.
Verse 16. Hear thou that has borne rule over the earth so long. This I say unto thee, before thou beginnest to appear. So before thou beginnest to appear no more.
So this is saying before this was decreed, before what? Before he even got to the point that he was going to die. Before thou beginnest to be no more, meaning before your end come, you got to know this. Go ahead.
Verse 17. There shall none after thee attain unto thy time, neither unto the half thereof.
You see that? The Lord said that second one, there shall none attain unto your time, means nobody after you is going to get your time, not even to the half of the time. And he ruled 45 years, and nobody else came to what? To rule the half of his time. That's why we just went, that's how you know Augustus is not the first one, actually Julius Caesar. Now, now let's bounce on back over and get to the point that we want. So verse 15 again, chapter 12, verse 15.
2nd Ezra chapter 12, verse 15. Whereof the second shall begin to reign, and shall have more time than any of the 12. And this do the 12 wings signify, which thou sawest.
So in other words, in the verse 1 and 2 of chapter 11, Ezra saw an eagle that had 3 heads and 12 feathered wings. That's what the 12 feathered wings represent, the 12 Caesars. In other words, it's talking about from the what? From the time of the time of the end of the Roman Republic, it entered into a dictatorship, and then from there, 11 more Caesars. Talking about those first 12 rulers. Go ahead. Amiyetazah? All right, let me go on. I don't know if he got cut off. I'm gonna go ahead and read verse 17. As for, can y'all hear me? Okay, good. All right. As for the voice which thou heardest speak, and that thou sawest not to go out from the head, but from the midst of the body thereof, this is the interpretation. Now, what's that saying? In chapter 11, verses 7 through 10, there was a phenomena of what? Of the eagles rising up, and a voice came out of the eagle, but it didn't come out of either of the 3 heads. It came out from the midst of the body. That phenomena meant something. What did that phenomena mean? this verse is going to tell us. All right, I'm going to read verse 17 again, so that you know verse 17 is in reference to chapter 11, verses 7 through 10. It says, as for the voice which thou heardest speak, and that thou sawest not to go out from the heads, but from the midst of the body thereof, this is the interpretation. That after the time of that kingdom, there shall arise great strivings, and it shall stand in peril of falling. This right here is the equivalent of Revelation chapter 13 and verse 3, where it said, I saw one of the heads, and it was what? It received a deadly wound, but then it was healed. Right here it says it once again, that after the time of that kingdom, there shall arise great strivings, and it shall stand in peril of falling. Nevertheless, it shall not then fall, but shall be restored again to his beginning. That beginning is called what? The Renaissance, the rebirth. So once again, here in verse 18, after the time of that kingdom, there shall arise great strivings. The great strivings began with the death of the Emperor Commodus. They made a movie about it. It's called Gladiator. After Commodus, that was 192 BC. Between 192 and 193, I'm sorry, AD, excuse me, not BC, but AD. 192, 193 AD, after the death of Commodus, they had a struggle where it's known as what? The year of the 5 emperors. And this is where Didius Julianus, Persinius Niger, Septimius Severus, and 2 others. I forget their names right now. Man, damn, if he was there, I would just have him look up the year of the 5 emperors. LT, look up the year. Oh, you got it? There you go, man.
The year of the 5 emperors.
So we could get those emperors' names. I just know the landowner who wrote the Praetorian Guard auctioned off. Now, why is this? Because this one here is given a little bit more detail than John got. John just said what? And I saw the beast, and one of its heads received a deadly wound. But this one is talking about the strife, right? The dynamic that led to the deadly wound. Let's read that. The year of the 5 emperors was 193 AD, in which 5 men claimed the title of Roman emperor. Pertinax, there he is. Didius Julianus, I just mentioned him. Persinius Niger, just mentioned him. This is the guy I keep forgetting. Claudius, Albinus, and Septimius Severus. This year started a period of civil war when multiple rulers vied for the chance to become Caesar. Now, the truth is, Julianus was the cat who bought it. Julianus, at his time, was one of, if not the richest man in the Roman Empire. And after the death of Commodus, the Praetorian Guard auctioned off the throne, and he was the one who was wealthy enough to purchase it. But then Pertinax and Persinius and Claudius and Septimius, these cats like, man, the Roman leaders was always going to be what? Military men. And so who is it that emerged from them victorious? It was Septimius Severus in 193 AD. So that from that period, from 193 AD all the way to 476 is the period that this verse here refers to at verse 18. 2nd Ezra chapter 12 and verse 18, after the time of that kingdom, there shall arise great strivings. So the great strivings is talking about this right here. Then it says it's talking about this struggle, this period of struggle that climaxed in when? In 476 AD, the fall under Romulus Augustus. Now listen to this. That after the time, please read verse 18.
Verse 18. That after the time of that kingdom, there shall arise great strivings, and it shall stand in peril of falling.
Stop. The peril of falling is talking about what took place in what? In 476. Now, how come it says the peril of falling here? And then we'll go and we'll actually read about the fall of the Roman Empire. Somebody said, why does the Bible say it stood in peril of falling? But then we go and we read that it fell. Because the Most High wasn't done with them. They hadn't fallen in the sense of what? Being eradicated as an empire. So in this prophecy of the eagle, the same kingdom is described as what? As having undergone strivings that led them almost being completely removed. Whereas the very same dynamic in what? In Revelation chapter 13 and verse 3 is described as one of those heads. So you notice it didn't say the beast. We're going to bounce back between Revelation chapter 13 and verse 3 and 2 Ezra chapter 12 verse 18. And I want to help the brothers and sisters understand the wording. Y'all, forgive me. I ain't been doing my vocal exercises, so now I'm all congested and stuff. Okay, Amayetazar, you got that?
What was the other scripture? Sorry.
It was Revelation chapter 13 and verse 3 again. I just want to bounce back and forth between this verse 18 and chapter 12 of 2 Ezra and Revelation chapter 13 and verse 3, so that I can put those two expressions, right, those two prophetical expressions in perspective.
Revelation chapter 13 and verse 3. And I saw one of these heads, as it were, wounded to death.
Now, why? You notice here it says the same thing. It doesn't say, it says as it were wounded to death, right? But it's not talking about the beast. The beast has 7 heads, remember? So when it says one of its heads, it's not talking about that it was going to be the end of this empire, the end of this nation. It was that this specific head was being wounded. And then what happened in verse 13, Amayetazar?
Verse 13. Behold, the days will come that there shall rise up a kingdom upon earth.
No. I'm talking about, I said verse 13, I'm in chapter 13 and verse 3 again. Read the whole chapter.
Sorry.
But not the whole verse. I mean, just the part where it says, but it was restored. I just want to go bit by bit.
Okay, Revelation chapter 12 and verse 3, middle of verse 3. And his deadly wound was healed.
Now, right there, that deadly wound was healed. What's the equivalent of that? Let's go back to 2 Ezra chapter 12, and we're going to read verse 18 again. And it's what? It's the last part of verse 18. It's all the same thing being reiterated. So read all of verse 18 again, Amayetazar. 2 Ezra chapter 12.
2 Ezra chapter 12 and verse 18. That after the time of that kingdom, there shall arise great strivings, and it shall stand in peril of falling.
That's that deadly wound. That's that head receiving a deadly wound. But then what happened? Go ahead.
Nevertheless, it shall not then fall, but shall be restored again to his beginning.
And that's in chapter 13 where it says, but the deadly wound was healed. Do you guys see this? Y'all out there in Texas land, do you guys, is this clear to you? Dawiyah and
I missed that last point, bro.
say that again?
I missed the last point.
What point was what? Well, I guess if you missed it, then you can tell me. Huh?
I think I missed the last thing you said.
Okay, I mean, yeah, because I read verse 18 again.
Verse 18.
And let me say this, y'all. You don't have to, well, I shouldn't say it, but I should say it. This is being streamed and then it's archived in you guys' account, right?
Huh.
So listen, y'all ain't got to take as many notes unless that's the way you actually listen better. You know what I mean? But you know, and then also you probably, I don't know what type of time you have to actually go back and watch the YouTube replays. You know what I mean? But the point is, that's what it's there for, so that when you're in class, you can take kind of notes more like shorthand. You don't have to do the detail thing. You go back and do the detail when you have time. But then I've been in Texas, so I know that brothers don't be having time to do the detail, right? Be working their asses off. But what we did was we're bouncing back and forth between Revelation chapter 13 and verse 3 and 2nd Ezra chapter 12 and verse 18 to show the similarities. The prophecy is talking about the same thing. The beast with 7 heads and 10 horns is 13. In chapter 13 of Revelation, one of those heads received the deadly wound, but then the wound was healed again. Here is described as what? As the kingdom standing in peril of falling, but then not falling, but being restored to its beginning. It's both prophesying about the same dynamic, but in different ways, different parabolic prophecies. And that's what I'm just trying to make the correlation, because the goal is after you guys get these apocalyptic blitzes, you're going to see that all of them, that Revelation chapters 12, 13, 15, 12, 13, 17, 19, 20, that 2nd Ezra chapter 11 and 12, 2nd Ezra chapter 13, that Daniel chapter 7, Daniel chapter 7, that Daniel chapter 11, Daniel chapter 12, that it was all talking about the same thing, but you have to know all of it, and you're going to see this, all of it together paints the clearest picture. And that's why I'm doing it like that. And so, but while I'm breaking down Revelation chapter 13, we're going to end up using all these other chapters to break it down. But by the time we get to 2nd Ezra chapter 11 and 12, we're going to be using Revelation chapter 13 and Revelation chapter 20 and Daniel chapter 12 to break it down, because they're all explaining each other.
Wow.
And that's why I'm putting so much emphasis on this verse 3. That's why I put so much emphasis on verse 2 to help see what was the significance of that leopard, right? Because that's the Greeks' foundation. That's the Edomites' foundation, the Greeks. So here we are in Revelation chapter 13 and verse 3 and 2nd Ezra chapter 12 and verse 18. We're going to do this one last time, then we're going to move on to verse 4. Okay, Amiyatazar?
Yeah.
So go ahead and do 2nd Ezra chapter 12 and verse 18 one last time.
Okay. 2nd Ezra chapter 12 verse 18. That after the time of that kingdom, there shall arise great strivings, and they shall stand in peril of falling. Nevertheless, it shall not then fall, but shall be restored again to his beginning.
Boom. So you see that. Now, what is that? So this is talking about the period between the great strivings is 193 AD. Y'all saw that. But then the period is really from 193 all the way to 476 is when it fell. But then in 1492 is what's considered by most historians is the official beginning. 476 is actually the date, the official date, historical date of what? Of the entering in of the Dark Ages. And 1492 is the official date beginning of the Renaissance. That's what now certain scholars prefer to use 1453, but 1453 talking about the fall of Constantinople is a different dynamic. In 1453, you had the Edomites that were Arab, that were Muslim believers, the Ottomans, the Turks, and they overthrew the capital of the Byzantine Empire that our fathers, and I'm talking about the entire kingdom was an Israelite kingdom, the Byzantine Empire, whereas the Roman was still the Roman Empire that had a succession of black people sitting on the throne. That's what happened between those two, between the Western capital, which was Italy, the city of Rome, and the Eastern capital, which was Constantinople, named after Constantine the Great, right? But the point is, those are what? Now let me say this. So the official fall, 476 AD, the official recovery or recuperation or Renaissance, 1492. That's roughly what? That's a little over 1,000 years, which takes us to where? That's what takes us to Revelation chapter 20. So read read Revelation chapter 13 and verse 3 again.
Revelation chapter 13 and verse 3. And I saw one of these heads, as it were, wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast.
Now that means we'll get back to that later. I want to give one more example. Let me see how much time we got of how this is described. We got 30 minutes to get down through this. So where else? There's two more places where it's completely clear, but I only have time to go over one of them. This dynamic of being in the midst of your nation and your empire developing and then being cut off only to rise again. Where else is that prophesied about this kingdom? It's prophesied in Revelation chapter 20. So let's go to Revelation chapter 20, Amiyatazar, and let's read verse 1.
Revelation chapter 20, verse 1. And I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit, and a great chain in his hand. And he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years.
Now hold on. It said that an angel came and did what? And with having a great, let's read it again, Amiyatazar, chapter 20.
Chapter 20, verse 1. And I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit, and a great chain in his hand. And he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years.
That's verse 1 and 2. Verse 1, the angel coming down from heaven, having the key to the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand, that is symbolic for a judgment. Not a judgment. It is a judgment and a sentence being handed down. Now, how do you know that? What leaves me with the impression to be able to say that all of Daniel chapter 4, that's what Daniel chapter 4 was about. Remember, Nebuchadnezzar or Belshazzar had a dream that Daniel had to break down, and he saw what was the watchers come with a chain. Let's listen. I want to say, how do we prove? Now, before we get too far into this, why am I at chapter 20? I'm here in chapter 20 to give you another scriptural reading in Revelations so that you can see that the dynamic of a prophecy of a kingdom emerging, taking control, being cut off, but then only to reemerge again, that is a what? It's a dominant theme. Maybe dominant is a word. It is dominant, but dominant is the word that is not the word that I want. I want to say it is a recurring theme. Because we just read it in Revelation chapter 13 in the form of one prophecy, one of the heads of a beast being cut off, but only to be healed again. We just read it in what? We just read it in 2 Ezra chapter 11 and 12 of an eagle that entered into what? A time of turmoil and stood in peril of falling, only to be recovered again to its beginning. Now, this is the same thing, but it's as though he's being detained. So, in order to really appreciate that, what you would actually have to do is read. We aren't going to read all of it, but we're going to read the key components so we can see it. We're going to read Daniel chapter 4. You guys on your own have to read Daniel chapter 4, verses 1 through 26, right? But I'm going to go right now. Let me see how much I'm going to have y'all read. Let me see. Let me put my marker in first. Hold on. Let me get myself together. I'm losing a lot of my pages here. Okay. I'm going to the book of Daniel, chapter 4. And we're going to read I want to at least read enough of the king's dream. Chapter 4. Okay. Listen, Amiyatazar, they really are going to have to read. I said through 1 to 26. Yeah, because it's a sentence, but let me see his name. Let me say this, y'all. You're going to have to read all of Daniel, chapter 4. At least Daniel chapter 4, verses 1 to 26, like I said. Because it's a vision. I'm looking for the verse, Amiyatazar, where it tells you what happened. Where some angel came down and gave the order to tie the tree up, to cut the tree down, and to bring it, to chain it or something. Hold up. Yeah, this is it. Listen up. Start off at verse 8. Daniel chapter 4 and verse 8. You guys, listen, write this down. Let me put it like this. Daniel chapter 4, verses 1 through, like I said, 26. You actually could read the whole thing, but it's really verse 1 through 26, and verses 27 to the end is basically what happened to him. He was warned, and then Nebuchadnezzar went on and did what he was warned against, and he had to suffer the consequences. But he had a dream that the Most High was warning him, and that he was being sentenced, and that sentence was going to be carried out against him because of his pride and not recognizing that the Most High had set him up. So Daniel chapter, you there, Amiyatazar?
Yeah, I'm here.
Daniel chapter 4, verses 1 through 26 is what helps you to understand Revelation chapter 20 and verse 1 and 2. So rather than to go all the way around the world, we got enough time to at least read that, Amiyatazar. So we're going to go ahead and start off at verse 1. Daniel chapter 4 and verse 1.
Daniel chapter 4 and verse 1. Nebuchadnezzar, the king, unto all people, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied unto you. I thought it good to show the signs and wonders that the high power have wrought toward me.
Now this is the king Nebuchadnezzar writing this. This is not Daniel. Go ahead.
Verse 3. How great are his signs, and how mighty are his wonders. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and his dominion is from generation to generation. Verse 4. Nebuchadnezzar was at rest in mine house. I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at rest in mine house, and flourishing in my palace. I saw a dream which made me afraid, and the thoughts upon my bed and the visions of my head troubled me. Therefore made I a decree to bring in all the wise men of Babylon before me, that they might make known unto me the interpretation of the dream.
Now remember, the one that we read about in chapter 2, he had a dream and he forgot it. But this dream, at least he remembers it. He's going to tell it to the guys, and he expects for them to be able to interpret it. Go ahead.
Verse 7. Then came in the magicians, the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers. And I told the dream before them, but they did not make known unto me the interpretation thereof.
Go ahead.
Verse 8. But at the last, Daniel came in before me, whose name was Belteshazzar, according to the name of my power, and in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. And before him I told the dream, saying,
no one else could break the dream down. He told it to Daniel. Go ahead.
Verse 9. O Belteshazzar, master of the magicians, because I know that the spirit of the holy powers is in thee, and no secret troubleth thee, tell me the visions of my dream, that I have seen, and the interpretation thereof. Verse 10. Thus were the visions of mine head in my bed. I saw, and behold, a tree in the midst of the earth, and the height thereof was great.
Go ahead.
The tree grew and was strong,
So
and the
listen to
height
this. This is tree, because this is one of the verses or one of those areas, not a verse only, but a whole dynamic that's used to help understand what the trees were in the garden in Genesis chapter 3. Go ahead. It has many implications and applications throughout the Bible to help us understand parables that speak in references of trees. Go ahead, Amiyetazar.
Verse 11. The tree grew and was strong, and the height thereof reached unto heaven, and the sight thereof to the end of all the earth. The leaves thereof were fair, and the fruit thereof much, and in it was meat for all. The beasts of the field had shadow under it, and the fowls of the heaven dwelt in the boughs thereof.
All the beasts of the field is talking about the kingdoms that he governed over. They ain't talking about animals. The beasts of the field, just like the 4 beasts in Daniel chapter 7, just like we're reading right now, the beast of in Revelation chapter 13. This is talking about all the kingdoms that were subject and under Babylonian rule and influence in his time. Go ahead.
And verse 12 from the top. The leaves thereof were fair, and the fruit thereof much, and in it was meat for all. The beasts of the field had shadow under it, and the fowls of the heaven dwelt in the boughs thereof.
Fowls of the heaven.
And all flesh was fed of it. I saw in the visions of my head upon my bed, and behold, a watcher and an holy one came down from heaven.
Now stop. This right here, this watcher and the holy one coming down from heaven is the equivalent of Genesis, right? Of Revelation chapter 20 and verse 1, where it says, and I saw an angel coming down from heaven. It's the same thing, same paradigm, just a different what? Just a different chapter. And in Revelation chapter 20, it is in reference to a kingdom, an empire. But in Daniel chapter 4, it was in reference to this individual and his pride. But it was the Most High warning him and pre-warning him of a sentence that he was going to have to undergo because of his pride. So verse 13 again, Amiyetazar.
Verse 13. I saw in the visions of my head upon my bed, and behold, a watcher and an holy one came down from heaven. He cried aloud and said thus, hew down the tree and cut off his branches, shake off his leaves.
Now what's happening? A judgment. This is what this means. Cut him off, cut him down, bring him down to size. Whereas in what? In Revelation chapter 20, it's saying, put this chain on him and bind him for 1,000 years. But what is it? It's a heavenly sentence, meaning this was something that he was going to have to go through. Speaking in reference to right here in Daniel chapter 4. Go ahead.
Verse 14. He cried aloud and said thus, hew down the tree and cut off his branches, shake off his leaves and scatter his fruit. Let the beasts get away from under it, and the fowls from his branches.
Meaning he was going to be losing control and influence over various kingdoms as a result of his pride. We'll see it. Go ahead.
Verse 15. Nevertheless, leave the stump of his roots in the earth.
Have you guys ever seen a tree stump cut down, a tree cut, and only the stump is there? Okay, do you know what that means? That means the tree can grow back again. Now, you know how long it takes trees to grow, but unless you pull the stump up out of the earth, the tree's gonna grow back. So this was the Most High in this, and then he's gonna say, put a band, or in other words, read it out yet, read verse 15 again from the top.
Verse 15. Nevertheless, leave the stump of his roots in the earth, even with a band of iron and brass. in the tender grass of the field.
So that band of iron and brass is what? Is symbolic, or it is equal to the chain that the angel have. He's being restricted. This stump, what happens when you cut it? First of all, this is what I learned when we was taking care of the land up here on the Yetzirah. So when you got a forest, you're supposed to go through your forest, you're supposed to check out all the trees. You're supposed to look to see which trees got parasites, and you'll know the trees that have worms and parasites because they have big mounds of it. It's not you know how a knot on a tree looks, but it'd be like it looks literally as if there's manure hanging off the side of the tree, because what happens is the worms burrow into the tree, they pick a spot and they eat and they defecate, and it just comes out and hangs from the tree, but not hanging, just protruding. You'll know all the sick trees. The minute you cut those trees down, guess what happens to the healthy trees around it? You cut them trees down and you remove them from the roots, the other trees get wider, they get thicker. They don't necessarily, they'll go up higher, but before they go up higher, they get wider so that they can go up higher. And so in order to keep the tree from getting wider or too wide, let's say you done got a house near it and you don't want the house to eventually get root bound, what happens? You got to put an iron band, a metal around the whole tree, and it keeps it from getting wider. And it's just a natural thing where it end up growing more taller and not as wide. So that's what the Most High said. Cut them down, put a band. Now I wouldn't have even, I couldn't explain this until I bought the land and had to start taking care of it. I was like, damn, this is what Daniel was talking about. Because it's designed to keep the tree from getting what? Too powerful here. But in the agricultural sense or in the forestry sense, it gets healthier. It gets more robust. So here, the angel is saying what? Nevertheless, leave the stump of the roots in the earth, meaning don't uproot it. Even with a band of iron and brass, that means you're still going to what? Keep it from getting more powerful. You're going to keep it from growing strong. This was the Most High having an angel sentence Nebuchadnezzar, but he was getting this warning in a dream. Go ahead, I'm going to get this out. Verse 15 again, I'm sorry.
Daniel chapter 4, verse 15. Nevertheless, leave the stump of his roots in the earth, even with a band of iron and brass in the tender grass of the field. And let it be wet with the dew of heaven, and let his portion be with the beasts in the grass of the earth.
In other words, the Most High was going to take, well, it'll resolve itself. Keep on reading. Remember, Daniel is, the king is telling Daniel the dream, and Daniel going to break it down. Go ahead.
Verse 16. Let his heart be changed from man's, and let a beast's heart be given unto him, and let 7 times pass over him.
The 7 times here is talking about 7 years that he was going to be reduced. See, this process that that the king is describing, his dream. In other words, we see this all the time when somebody that's of good standing and all of a sudden something happened to them and all of a sudden they're homeless, manure pants, urinating, bum, don't want to be cleaned up. That be a spirit that the Most High give them, a beast spirit. They don't have no problem eating out of trash cans, just laying around urine and feces soaked clothes. That's what the Most High was telling this dude. I'm gonna break. You think you're powerful? I'm gonna break you down to a beast. But it was a sentence that he was being warned of. But he went and did what it took, and the Most High finally passed sentence on him. Go ahead, Amayetazah.
Verse 17. This matter is by the decree of the watchers, and the demand by the word of the holy ones, to the intent that the living may know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth it to whomsoever he will, and setteth up over it the basis of men.
Go ahead.
Verse 18.
So the watchers is what? The angels coming to tell him that. That's what he heard in the dream. Remember, he's still telling Daniel his dream. Go ahead.
Verse 18. This dream I, King Nebuchadnezzar, have seen. Now thou, O Belteshazzar, declare the interpretation thereof.
Go ahead, Amayetazah. Go ahead.
Now thou, O Belteshazzar, declare the interpretation thereof. For as much as all the wise men of my kingdom are not able to make known unto me the interpretation. But thou art able, for the spirit of the holy gods is in thee.
Go ahead.
Verse 19. Then Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, was astonished for 1 hour, and his thoughts troubled him.
Now, Amayatazar, while I got you here, this verse is one of the verses that I used. Remember how we was teaching the brothers about servitude and us being in captivity in Deuteronomy chapter 28, and how the mentality that we're supposed to execute our punishment in. Try to show you something. This is a key verse right here in that. I know it might sound off topic, but while we're here, I want to talk about it because I always use Daniel and Joseph. Joseph, our forefather, who was the savior of Egypt and of Israel, right, during the time of the famine in Canaan, and Daniel, these are the two, and then Jacob under his father-in-law showed us how the Most High expect for us to operate when we're in the position of a servant. So what happened? Daniel, don't forget, Daniel is in slavery. Daniel is in captivity. Remember, there was a time after this where he was threatened and thrown in the lion's den for not participating in the idolatry of Babylon. People think that Daniel had it good because he was up in the palace. Daniel was more in proximity to suffer the king's wrath at a whim. The king got mad at some shit. He wasn't gonna call for no bums on the street over in the region where all the Hebrew dregs was at. That's what would happen. What happened with Daniel chapter 2? The king couldn't remember his dream, and his wise men couldn't tell him shit. They was all gonna be put to death. That was the peril that position put you in if you couldn't fulfill your position. Now, why do I say that? With all of that danger constantly looming and Daniel constantly being plotted against, that was how Daniel ended up getting thrown in the lion's den. That was how the 3 holy children ended up getting thrown in the fiery furnace. People setting them up because they knew that we honored a different God. And so they would set us up and bring to the king's attention the fact that we won't follow your ways, king. He won't follow your edict. But with all that danger, with all that peril, and constantly being plotted against, Daniel was right here doing what, Amayatazar? He was worried about the king because he knew what the dream meant. Daniel was worried. People out there in YouTube land talking about, okay, you're going too far. I'm going to show you that. That's why we're reading the Bible. Because what it does is it helps us to understand that when the Most High chastises us, we're supposed to lock into and fulfill our punishment in the frame of mind, understanding that we're being punished. We're not the victims. We're the culprits. Running around here with chips on your shoulder where you shouldn't have sinned. Running around here all mad at everybody all the time, like the world owed you something, well, you should have kept the commandments. Now I'm going to read this again. I'm going to read that verse again. I'm going to get this on.
Verse 19. Then Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, was astonished for 1 hour, and his thoughts troubled him.
Now, why was he troubled? Because he knew that this was a dream that his king wasn't going to really like the interpretation. And he wasn't troubled for himself. You're going to find out by the suggestion that he makes to the king. He was sincerely troubled over his master. He wasn't on Uncle Tom. But his job was to be there and be a wise man. And the only way that the Most High promoted Daniel was if Daniel walked in the spirit of the Most High. And the Most High have us, if Daniel was there to see to it that the king could do righteousness, then that was what? Then that was what Daniel's job was. Daniel's job wasn't to be there and be all angry because he's in captivity. And so I ain't going to tell the king, or I'm going to act like I don't know, or I'm going to lie about the interpretation. Daniel was like, damn, this one is to the desire of your enemies, king. He was literally worried. Now, why do I bring that up? So it demonstrates, Amayatazar, the mentality of Daniel's, let me put it like this, his mental disposition, He wasn't no angry nigga in captivity. He knew what he came from, what his people had did. He understood that how many thousands of years his people had and wouldn't turn from their evil. He knew that. And so what was he doing? He was enduring his punishment in the spirit of contriteness. I don't give a shit what none of these other Israelite teachers gonna tell y'all. Like the Most High don't want us out here acting like we're the culprits or like we're the victims. We're not the victims. Esau's gonna get judged for the shit that he did, but we got judged for what we did. When Esau brought us over in change, he didn't do nothing wrong, because that's to suggest that the Most High's what? Judgment was wrong. What he did was he didn't keep the laws either, and he knew them. He brought us over here and taught us lies on the Holy Bible. He pushed homosexuality, lesbianism, and LGBTQ+ism. He broke all the laws. He went and polluted the earth. He destroyed what the scripture referred to in 2nd Esdras chapter 11 is that the world, or chapter 11, is that the world, what? That the violence of the eagle waged violence, waged war on the Most High's creation. That's what he did. That's why the water is radiated. That's why the atmospheres have continual and permanent blankets of levels of radiation from all the subatmospheric nuclear testing, or I should say above surface atmospheric nuclear testing, subaquatic nuclear testing, blowing up entire islands just to see if they could do it. That's what the Most High going to destroy him for. He's going to destroy him. He's going to destroy him for killing and executing injustice in us. But as far as having brought us over in slave ships and having judged us and made us into slaves, brother, that was the judgment on us. And to suggest that that was wrong is to suggest that the Most High's judgment was wrong, and it wasn't. So Daniel is in a specific mentality. He understands he's a servant, so he's embracing his punishment, because that's how you demonstrate contriteness to the Most High. And you guys have sons and daughters. You know damn well, if they ever do everything in the world to try to circumvent and get out of your punishment, all that does is make you angrier. That's how we are here on earth. We do something wrong, our children do something wrong, we punish them, and then they blame us because they did something wrong and not a punishment. Read that verse one more time, Mama Yetazah.
Verse 19. Then Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, was astonished for 1 hour, and his thoughts troubled him. The king spake and said, Belteshazzar, let not the dream or the interpretation thereof trouble thee.
Listen, the king knew that Daniel was what? Stalling. He knew that Daniel knew the interpretation, and he could see that Daniel was worried about having to give him bad news. He said, listen, man, don't you worry about it. Don't let that trouble you. Just tell me what it is either way. Watch, go ahead.
Okay. Belteshazzar answered and said, my lord, the dream be to them that hate thee, and the interpretation thereof to thine enemies.
He's like, man, this is in favor of those that hate you and to your enemies. That's, you know, guess what that's called, Doc? That's called concern. That's called concern. And it's indicative of the what? Of the mentality that Daniel served in. Go ahead, Amiyatazar.
Verse 20. The tree that thou sawest, which grew and was strong, whose height reached unto the heaven, and the sight thereof to all the earth.
Verse 21.
Whose leaves were fair, and the fruit thereof much, and in it was meat for all, under which the beasts of the field dwelt, and upon whose branches the fowls of the heaven had their habitation. It is thou, O king, that art grown and become strong.
So listen, see, the dream was what? Him being warned of a pending sentence that was going to be carried, a judgment that was going to be carried out, that he was being sentenced to literally lose his mind and become a beast. Read on down.
For thy greatness is grown and reacheth unto heaven, and thy dominion to the end of the earth.
Go ahead.
And whereas the king saw a watcher and an holy one coming down from heaven, and saying, hew the tree down and destroy it, yet leave the stump of the roots thereof in the earth, even with a band of iron and brass, and the tender grass of the field, and let it be wet with the dew of heaven, and let his portion be with the beasts of the field, till 7 times pass over him.
In other words, whereas you saw all of that, this is the interpretation. Go ahead, verse 24.
Verse 24. This is the interpretation, O king, and this is the decree of the Most High,
So
which
what
is
did I
come.
say? I said a sentence, but it's a decree. But it was a decree of what? Of him what? Being judged to have to suffer something if he didn't break away from his pride and failing to recognize the Most High. Go ahead.
This is the decree of the Most High, which is come upon my lord the king. That verse 25, that they shall drive thee from men, and thy dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field. And they shall make thee to eat grass as oxen, and they shall wet thee with the dew of heaven, and 7 times shall pass over thee, so thou know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth it to whomsoever he will.
Yep, go ahead.
Verse 26, and whereas they commanded to leave the stump of the tree roots, thy kingdom shall be sure unto thee, after that thou shalt have known that the heavens do rule.
So the Most High said, you're gonna have animals, you're gonna have a beast's mind, you're gonna lose your kingdom for a while. But guess what happened? 7 years later, you're gonna be restored once you recognize who the hell set you up. So why do I go here in reference to Revelation chapter? We're gonna finish on yet. In reference to Revelation chapter 20 and verse 1, because it's another watcher, but it's not called a watcher, it's called what? An angel, and he's carrying a chain, which means captivity, which means restriction. What did the Lord tell us about us? He said, and you therefore shalt thou serve thine enemies, right? For want of all things, for hunger, for thirst, for nakedness, and want of all things, and he shall put what? A yoke of iron upon thee until he have destroyed thee. It's the same thing. But this one is in reference to King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon. But the one in Revelation chapter 20 is in reference to what? It's in reference to the beast with 7 heads and 10 horns. He's also called the dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, and Satan, that old serpent. That's Revelation chapter 20 and verse 2. So once again, what are we doing? We're showing you the kingdom that was prophesied to emerge and undergo a dynamic where it stood in peril of falling, but then regaining once again a new beginning is a recurring prophetical theme that happened. And the reason it's recurring is because that's the Most High's way of letting you know that it's sure to happen. So we're going to finish up Amayetazah just with verse 27, all right?
Verse 21st, verse 27. Verse 27.
Go ahead.
Wherefore, O king, let my counsel be acceptable unto thee.
Now listen to this. Now, where in verse 23, in verse 19, where he showed that troubling, whether to have to tell the king the true interpretation troubled him, that was a demonstration of concern. And to prove that it was concern, after he finishes interpreting the dream, he has what? An advice that's designed to help the king's tranquility and peace be extended so that this sentence doesn't come down upon him. Now, if Daniel really didn't give a damn, Daniel could have just said, yeah, that's the dream, y'all, and not even offer up a suggestion to what Amayetazah so as to try to circumvent a pending judgment. Now, let's read it again, 27. He gonna make it, this is Daniel what? Acting in the spirit of contriteness toward where he is. Acceptance of his purpose and what and why he was there. Just like, let me say this out. How else do you know that that's what it was? In the book of Tobit, the angel in the last couple of chapters, right, chapter 12, I think, of the book of Tobit, when Raphael goes to make himself known that who he was, what is the first thing that he said? He said it, and then he reiterated. He said it twice. He said, "It is good to keep the word of the secrets of a king, but it is not good to what? To keep the works of the Most High hidden." In other words, this is what Daniel was there to do, to let the Most High's works be known. So read that verse on the end, verse 27.
Verse 27. Wherefore, O king, let my counsel be acceptable unto thee, and break off thy sins by righteousness, and thine iniquities by showing mercy to the poor, if it may be a lengthening of thy tranquility.
So what is he saying? He says, so maybe you might want to what? You might want to start doing some righteousness. And of course, he's not being vague. Daniel was going to instruct him as what is it that pleases the Most High. He said, and then also make sure you show a little bit more mercy to the poor. This is the way that you could what? That you could extend your tranquility. That's not something that you say to any king if you're running around here. Of course, nobody want to be enslaved. But I'm trying to show you the mentality that Daniel was operating in once there. And it's the same thing with Joseph when sold into slavery. How else did Joseph end up being what? The favorite of his master and all of his affairs put in his hands. And then when he ended up being falsely accused of adultery and getting thrown in prison, it's only a matter of time before he rises to the top and has all these things, all these privileges, because he embraced where he was, because he what? He locked into the lessons of his father, Jacob. By the time Joseph was 17 years old, he was fully prepared for whatever would have came. And the Most High tell you in the book of Psalms 105 that Joseph was being tried. He was being tested when the Most High had him serving slavery and imprisonment. Anyway, I'm just adding those in there since these verses are here. But next time around, next Friday, we're going to pick up with Revelations chapter 13 and verse 3 and how it correlates to what? To Revelations chapter 20 and verse 1 and 2. In other words, we're still what? We're still demonstrating how this theme of an emerging kingdom suffers a setback, this is me in my own words, only to reemerge again, that is a recurring theme that you'll find there, right? Revelations chapter 13 and verse 3. Second Exodus chapter 12 and verses 10 through 18. Revelations chapter 20 verses 1 through 3, and then back to 7 and 9 again. And then Revelation chapter 17 also. It's all, and then Revelation chapter 6. It's over and over. And all of that is a manifestation of the second half of Genesis chapter 3 and verse 15, where the serpent was told that the seed of the woman would wound his head, and that it would come back and wound injure the heel of the seed of the woman. It's going back and forth of a power struggle and during the time of the Gentiles. That's what that chapter, that verse, Genesis chapter 3 and verse 15 was alluding to. That the power struggle constantly going on this world during the time of the Gentiles between Jacob and Esau. Anyway, so that's it for this evening, but that's what we're going to pick up next week, all right? I want to say that's why I call it Apocalyptic Blitz, because it's all things of the book of Revelation, Daniel, and 2nd Esdras. To help us clearly understand, especially now, the times that we're in. I imagine that this whole series could be cut off just by Christ coming. That's how close we are. So y'all get y'all some rest, man, and do your thing. And I will see y'all on next Friday. I'm yet to tell myself we're so busy, y'all, with other things that we really don't have more time. I wish, we could give more, but then there wouldn't be space for y'all brothers to grow and emerge and end up on that podium. That's their true objective, to raise up teachers. Yet to say any final words, brother?
No.
Okay. All right. I'll see you later. Well, I guess for you it's later on today, right?
Yeah.
Damn, brother. All right.
It's 5 o'clock in the morning.
Damn, yeah, I'll see you later on today, brother.
Yeah, I'll see you in like how many hours? 15 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll see you later.
All right, shalom. Hey, shalom,
All right.
brothers up in San Antonio. Good to see you.
Shalom.